front. Parayko pumps. He scores! Colton Parayko puts the rebound in. Goal number 9. 1-0 Blues. Ferrario goes to get it. Has it along the wing. Quick to the blue line. Tucker with a shot. He scores! Boxa deflects it in. High glove on Vladar. And the Blues take a 2-1. 3 seconds to go. Buchnevich eats it. Bring out the Zamboni. Game 1 to the Blues. Game 2 Thursday night as the St. Louis Blues beat the Flames 2-1.
Yeah, it's a good start, but we have on Thursday another big game. Calgary, they hold the spot. What we want, we have to get there. You know, it's a big chance for us, especially when we play at home.
I look forward to the strategic changes that we'll try and anticipate that they make, because they're a real good coaching staff over there, and the adjustments that we will make.
It doesn't happen very often, but the Blues are playing a regular season series against Calgary, which is essentially a playoff series with Alex and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kyle.
Hey.
It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN.
Bradford was Tanner yesterday, so
It only happened once.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and get that
Tanner
back on
will
track
be
after a
Grant
while.
tomorrow, and we'll be good.
Blues win last night 2-1 on home ice. They end up winning game 1 of what is effectively a 2-game set against the Calgary Flames. They got to win game 2 as well to keep themselves really in this thing. Alex, it was an impressive win. And it felt very much like a Jim Montgomery style of win. They prevented high danger chances, only 3 of them for Calgary last night against the Blues. The goal was a weird one.
Yeah.
Jordan Bennington was really good last night for the most part, and then the goal happened. It's like, what was that? Overall, though, the Blues played a good game. What was your biggest takeaway from that one, Alex?
It was the defensive side of the game. And you know, it's funny, BK, because Blues fans must be in kind of a weird spot right now in terms of how this team is playing, because I got a lot of reaction and interaction of people frustrated of how the offense looked last night.
Oh,
and
really?
That was not my concern at all. Because, I mean, it's back-to-back games where you scored 1 goal? Dude, this offense has been great since Jim Montgomery has taken over. And when you have a little bit of a slip-up, they'll figure it out. My biggest thing going into that was, how do you play defensively? Because prior to those games that you gave up, or you scored 1 goal in back-to-back, you gave up 6 goals to Minnesota and Columbus. Defensively, the boat was leaking. Last night, they tightened that ship up so well, it looked impressive. From the start, Jim Montgomery said, look, we are going to win this game in front of our own crease and in the neutral zone. And the Blues were physical as all hell in those areas last night. The natural stat trick had the Blues giving up 3 high-danger scoring chances to the Calgary Flames. And mind you, Kadri and Huberdeau and Pospisil came into that game as one of the highest scoring chance lines in the National Hockey League. Like, they were ranked one of the best teams in terms of scoring chances in the NHL. And that team put together 15 total scoring chances. Berube used to tell us all the time, 12, you know it's a great defensive game. So for me, I felt like that was a building block of how the Blues can start to get this win streak going again. You got to tighten the ship in terms of not giving up high-danger chances, not giving up slot shots. Your penalty kill went 2 for 2 and didn't give up a shot on goal against the Calgary Flames. To me, that was a game I walked away from and said, this is great. Now, mind you, we said yesterday, like, fool me once, I'm not going to do this again. I got to see it Thursday, and then you got to see it Saturday. But that's the start you wanted for this stretch, to where you tightened the ship up defensively and said, we're not going to make mistakes.
I felt like you saw the urgency that they were lacking, over the weekend. One of the things that you heard from Jim Montgomery after that game against Columbus is just how disappointed he was in their lack of urgency in the game. And I felt like you saw that on display last night. I also felt like you saw the coaching with some urgency. That third period, you almost didn't see the third line, the quote-unquote third line that they put out there for the team. They had, I think it was 1 shift in the third period, if I'm not mistaken, 2 shifts in the third period. One of them was 30 seconds right off the bat, and the other one was when the Blues got scored on in that third period. And then they didn't see the ice at all the rest of the period. He was just leaning on his guys that he knew he could trust down the stretch in that game. And one of those players was Matthew Joseph.
Yeah.
You mentioned the penalty kill. They put him in there because they wanted to see what he could do for them. He went out there and helped them. So I think that's the way that I would go with it again against Calgary coming up tomorrow night. It's a good start, but that's all it is, man. I've seen this team play some good games recently, especially under Jim Montgomery, and then you follow it up with a stinker. They win 4-0 against Ottawa, and then they lose 6-4 on the road at Columbus. They respond to that 6-4 loss against Columbus by coming out looking good against Minnesota and then finding a way to lose that one 6-4 as well. They have got to build some consistency to their game. Doing it back-to-back against the same team on home ice, that's a really good start. But last night was just a start, nothing more.
It was, and I liked Steve out on his postgame with Kerbs and Joey. He was so to the point, matter of fact. He said that final minute was the entire game for us. We had a full commitment to winning this one. The final 3 minutes, the Blues blocked 5 shots from the Calgary Flames. They blocked 18 of them overall last night. And Steve Ott said, and Radek Fox has said in the postgame, they have the spot, we won it, and we played that way tonight. It's a start, absolutely. I don't think it's going to matter even if you win Thursday. To me, it's going to come down to what do you do Saturday? Because I've seen them string 2 good games together. And look, it could be a jumping off point against the Calgary Flames team if you take 4 points and don't give them any opportunity to breathe. This team has to find a way to go from a 2-game win streak to a 4-game win streak. You've got to build it there. But that's why I didn't really care what happened on the offensive side. Yeah, it was a little choppy last night. Yeah, the passes didn't look great. Yeah, you didn't have those high-danger opportunities a whole lot. But, man, the more important thing was making sure you tighten things up around your own goaltender. And you had a couple of guys, in my opinion, that played their best games this season, including Colton Parayko.
They also have some personnel issues. We're getting a lot of texts that are pushing back on this, Alex, that are pushing back on.
Hold on, this is my surprise
talk about the St. Louis Blues. So I thought they played fine last night. I thought they looked pretty good. They got the job done, and ultimately, this isn't about style points right now. This is about getting the wins. If you get the points, you're in a place where you need to be. And right now, Calgary was, prior to last night, up so far on you that you just need the points. And that's it. They have a third line issue. And we've talked about this a lot. We talked about it coming into the year. I asked you, Alex, are we really sure that Radek Fox, who in his career is like a 25-point producer, is that really what you're looking for from your third-line center? And I think last night we saw, man, compared to what you had previously, yeah, that's exactly what they need. They are lacking a third-line center. They're lacking third-line wingers. Brandon Saad, just not up to snuff right now. Alexander Texier, clearly not a third-line player. You got more out of Joseph and Toropchenko with Foxa on that third line than you have been getting from your third line for most of the season. I think Bolduc is another guy that should fit into that mix occasionally. I would like to see what it looks like with Foxa, Bolduc, and Joseph on that third line. Let's see what it looks like for a little while. But that is clearly the place where you are lacking. You're also lacking on that top line left wing. I thought Neighbors was fine last night. I don't think that's what you want up there long term, but it is what it is. You have a personnel problem there. What did you make, Alex, of the way that they went about utilizing that bottom 6 last night and what they were able to get out of the fourth line, which became the third line by the third period?
It didn't surprise me that they basically shut down Saad, Sundqvist, and Texier. I expected that because it's got to be lines you trust, and especially in a tight game like that, you can't put a liability out there. And that honestly is what that line is right now. I mean, we all love Oskar Sundqvist in St. Louis. There's no denying that. He's like a hometown hero to us. But Oskar Sundqvist, he's not the fleetest of foot right now.
He's slow.
But he's also taking bad penalties. Like that slashing penalty that he took, I think it was the second period. Man, that would have been a critical one if your penalty kill doesn't come through for it with you. Brandon Saad, you want that consistency to be there, but unless he's scoring goals, Brandon Saad is not effective for you. He's not a two-way forward. He's kind of putting pucks in bad places. And unfortunately for Alex Texier, you're just not getting the offense. So to me, that line was a liability because you're not creating offensive opportunities and you don't trust them defensively. So what are you going to do? You're going to sit on the bench. Sometimes that is your third line. Sometimes that's where you're at. But they've just got a personnel on that line all across the board. And you can't fix the center spot. Like, you could put Foxa up there and then put Nathan Walker as the centerman on the fourth line. But to me, you lose a line with Foxa on that fourth line that's really your third line that you trust. So I think it's kind of like Sundqvist is here.
The trade for Ryan O'Reilly? Is that what you're saying?
Why not, man? Why not, man?
We got it on the text line. Multiple people are already saying, let's go get ROR.
Honestly, though, I get it. Love ROR. Dvorsky's going to be in that spot / the second line spot. Shen's going to be in your third line spot in the future, so I don't need ROR.
If they eat 50%, I'm ready.
If they eat 50%.
2 things need to happen. 1, Blues need to win the next 2 games. 2, they eat 50% of the salary. If they do that, let's do it.
And take on one of my contracts, sure.
Well, at that point, whatever. It's $2.5 million for Ryan O'Reilly.
Maybe. If people are excited about it, I'm not going to shoot down their hopes and dreams.
Grant, would you be interested?
I would be interested, but not for what it's going to cost. The Predators have said that they're treating it, he doesn't have this, but they're treating it like it's a no-trade clause with Ryan O'Reilly.
But if they're treating it that way, that means he gets to dictate where he goes, which means they get very little in return.
See, I read it that they're treating it that way. They don't want to trade him unless you make it a really good offer.
I think that's what they meant by it.
Well,
like it's going to cost
they said no
more.
move clause.
Because I think they want to keep him, and unless somebody gives them a great offer and Ryan O'Reilly's okay with it, they don't want to move him.
Only helps the player, not the team. The no move gives the player all of the leverage, and it removes all of the leverage from the team. If they're treating it that way, they are saying Ryan O'Reilly gets to determine where he wants to go. And we are treating him that way because he's a veteran that chose to come here, and so we are going to do our good service, do our good deed towards the player by treating him accordingly. Maybe I'm misreading it, but that was my read on the situation is we are going to allow the player to decide. It's why Nolan Arenado has all of the leverage right now and why the Cardinals are having such a hard time moving him is because he gets to decide. If he didn't have a no trade clause, they could move him anywhere. They could have already sent him to the Houston Astros. Them treating Ryan O'Reilly this way, first of all, is malpractice by the organization, in my opinion. And second of all, means that he gets to dictate where he's going.
Yep.
Now, I don't know how likely any of this is. The Blues have brought back guys in the past that they decided to move on from, looking specifically at David Perron. But in the scenario where the Blues win over the next couple of games, whether it's Ryan O'Reilly or Granlund, whoever the guy is, I will be interested in looking at who that third line center is.
I would do it, absolutely, because frankly, that plays on your third line for the now, and now I can put a Zach Bolduc in my lineup and have him out there without any liability because I trust Ryan O'Reilly. If it's available to you, I would absolutely look into it because it gives you that. Your liabilities right now, in my opinion, that top line winger that plays with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, I love Jake Neighbors. I just don't think he's there yet. And your third line in general. And unfortunately for the Blues, their third line options, they're not the greatest right now. You don't really have a centerman. Oscar Sundqvist is there and you're fine with it, but you need something else. You don't really have the winger that can be that net front presence 200 foot forward. Brandon Saad's not it. Texier's not it. And if Joseph's on that bottom line, now you're talking about putting Nathan Walker in. So I right now, they don't have a third line that they can trust, and that, I think, is going to be their biggest challenge in the next couple of weeks.
I would also love Ryan O'Reilly next to Zach Bolduc. I think he can help you get more out of Bolduc because he brings him along. He can make up for... He can cover up some of the mistakes that may happen while Bolduc is on the ice. And if you have O'Reilly, Joseph, Bolduc, that's a decent third line to me.
I guarantee Jim Montgomery would be on board with that from that first season that he was there as the assistant coach.
He's not the player that he was, but he's a really solid player. We brought up the comparison the other day. He could be your Bozak.
Yeah.
He could be your Bozak.
I think Scott Wheeler in that piece on The Athletic basically said Ryan O'Reilly and Dalibor Dvorsky are very similar players. Why wouldn't you want that with your team? I think this is going to come down to if they want that to happen, they need to win the next two games.
That's the biggest thing.
You got to win the next two games. And honestly, if I'm them, I'm looking at O'Reilly and I'm looking at Taylor Hall, who I brought up yesterday. One of the two options I've got to go out there and get so I can fix a problem on my team.
He is Alex Ferrario. That is Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube, as always, at youtube.com/101ESPN The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. In 15 minutes, we'll talk things over with Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, as they are in the midst of what is effectively a two-game series, a two-game playoff series in the middle of the regular season against the Calgary Flames. But coming up next, we got to talk about the Mizzou basketball win from last night. That is the kind of win that earns you a tournament bid. It is also the kind of win that gets Mizzou fans officially back on board with Dennis Gates. It's been a tough year or so for Dennis. He's back in our good graces. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Brill. Contested three. Oh, my. Wow. Right in the face of Elijah Martin. Caleb Brill, the team captain. This one could clinch it. And he does. You're talking about a team now that's going to improve to 3-1 in the SEC. This will end it. Mizzou knocks off the number 5 team in the land in Gainesville.
You absolutely love to see it. That's what it sounded like last night on the SEC Network as the Tigers take down the Florida Gators, as we predicted yesterday right here on the show, Alex Ferrario.
You shut your dirty lying mouth.
That is exactly what I said. I can't speak for Alex Ferrario, but I said yesterday on the show, you won't find any receipts otherwise, Mizzou would go down to Gainesville and take down the Florida Gators. Nobody can suggest otherwise. It's the first time now that Missouri has beaten 2 top 5 teams in the same season, Alex, since 2009.
Ooh.
They did it against Oklahoma and Memphis that year. This year, they've done it against Kansas, and then last night on the road against Florida. This is the kind of win, Alex, that gets you into the NCAA tournament. Somebody on our text line asked a really good question. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. They said, this is the first time that Missouri has done this, where they went on the road and beat a top 5 opponent since, 2012, I think it was, since they've been in the SEC effectively. Has any other team done it this year? The answer to that question is no. Nobody else has gone on the road and won a game as an unranked team against a top 5 opponent. In fact, it's only happened 5 times over the last 4 seasons. 6 times, excuse me. Here are those teams, Alex, because I wanted to see what those teams ended up doing. Did they get to the tournament? When they got to the tournament, what did it mean for them? So 2024 Clemson went on the road and beat a top 5 ranked opponent in North Carolina last season. They were number 6 seed in the tournament and ended up going to the Elite 8.
Oh, baby.
2023, James Madison went on the road, beat a top 5 ranked Michigan State team. James Madison was unranked at the time. They ended up as a 12 seed in the tournament, won their first round game, ended up losing in the second round. 2023, Washington State did this. Don't worry about it. They ended up at 500 on the season. 2022, North Carolina went on the road and beat a top 5 ranked Duke team when North Carolina was unranked that year. Guess what they did that season, Alex?
What'd they do?
North Carolina went to the national title game that year.
Baby,
Lost
Mizzou
it, but they did
so
go to the
back.
national championship that year. 2022, Oregon did this. They ended up going 2015. We're on the outside looking in. Don't worry about it. And then Miami back in 2022 was a number 10 seed, and they went to the Elite 8 that season. So what we're talking about is when you show the capacity to do this as an unranked team, it typically portends good things for you, not just for the rest of the season and your ability to get into the tournament, but it shows that you have the ability to beat whoever it is that they throw at you during the regular season or in the NCAA tournament. I don't know what the rest of the season is going to hold for Mizzou. The SEC is as good as I've seen any conference be in college basketball in my memory bank. This is unbelievable what we're seeing. It's like, I think it's 13 of the top 25 teams in the country are in the SEC this year. Missouri has 12 quad 1 games the rest of the way. That's absurd. So it's not going to be an easy path. But what last night showed me, they basically, if they just take care of business, go 500 the rest of the way in the conference slate, you're getting to the NCAA tournament, probably as a 7, 8, or 9 seed minimum. And this shows you that they have the ceiling to be more than that. What'd you learn about Mizzou last night, Alex?
I mean, I'm exactly where you're at. And the part that really impressed me was 2 games ago, they kind of got bullied out of the game against Auburn. And that's the number 1 seed. You expect that. But then look at the adjustment that took place by them. They take down LSU, take down Vanderbilt, but then you get another top-ranked opponent, and you go out there and you kind of manhandle them in the first period. I think I saw the stat that that was the first time Mizzou put 50 points up in the first half since 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And that team, Florida, at least according to Ken Palm, is ranked 20 or top 20 in terms of defensive ratings in all of college basketball.
Florida's a legitimately great team. Not a good one, a legitimately great team.
And you put 50 points up on them in the first half. And look, Florida made the push in the second half. It's expected, but you held on and you at least kept your name ahead of them. The part that stuck out to me was the same thing that I told you after that Kansas win. They bullied Florida in that game. And that's the part that I didn't know Mizzou had the ability to do. They've got the shooters. Caleb Grill was impressive last night. But underneath the hoop, they found a way to outman that team in terms of picking up rebounds, forcing them to make mistakes, and then they capitalized on their opportunities.
I also want to give credit to Dennis Gates, who coached a great game last night.
Yeah.
They ended up in big-time foul trouble. You have Tony Perkins have to leave the game because of a flagrant 2, and I'll just mention it here. The officiating last night, I hate complaining about officiating. I think it's a loser's mentality. The officiating last night was embarrassing. Like, I think they had 7 different reviews that they had to go to, which was horrific, and I think they made the wrong decision on like 4 of them. The flagrant 2 was absurd. Then they had a situation where it was clearly goaltending. The announcers say before they go to the review, hey, oh yeah, I see it now. It's the left hand that goes up and hits the rim. And then they go to the review, and like 2 seconds after the announcer says, oh, I see the left hand, gonna go ahead and go for 2 free throws. What are we doing? It's ridiculous. But anyways, set that aside. Mizzou won, so we don't have to complain about the officiating. What he did with his rotation, where he trusted T.O. Barrett, a true freshman who had played in 8 games prior to last night, to handle the point guard duties down the stretch. And T.O. Barrett deserves a lot of credit for this as well. He did a fantastic job, did not have any like huge mistakes. He had one where it almost became a steal, but it ended up going out of bounds, so no harm, no foul. I think Dennis Gates gets a lot of criticism for the length of his rotation. Just too many guys as a part of the rotation. Last night was a reminder as to why he handles things the way that he does. T.O. Barrett, being in 8 games prior to last night, gave him the opportunity and the confidence to go out there and do what he did. Them having a guy like Trent Pierce play as often as he does allows him to go out there in crunch time when he's playing as well as he did last night. And he was great in that game yesterday. And feel confident in those spots. They can choose based on how they're performing in the first 30 minutes what their crunch time lineup's going to be. And it might be something different in every game. Yeah. This is not like the team that they had where it was Kobe Brown and he's the dude you're going to at the end of games. Some nights it's going to be Mark Mitchell. Some nights it's going to be Tamar Bates, who had a fantastic game for them against Kansas that I'm sure many of you saw. Last night it was Caleb Grill, who was the best player on the court, not just for Mizzou, but for either of those 2 teams. So I've been really impressed by this team this year. I was a skeptic coming into the season, and I said, coming out of that Memphis game that looked like more of the same. This is not the same team that we saw a year ago. This is a very, very different team than what we saw last year. The offense is really good. The defense is good enough. Yeah. And they're probably going to make the NCAA tournament. I am officially a believer in Dennis Gates. Yes, you earned the gimme, the mulligan last year, and now it looks like he's got this program heading in the right direction.
Yeah,
again.
And a lot of this is just because of his ability to recruit the right players in transfer portal and bring the right guys in. I mean, you're talking about a difference maker in one season to where you couldn't win a game in the SEC versus now taking down 2 different top 5 opponents.
314-399-9646 is the Your Comfort Service X line. From the 314, the praise pouring in from all directions. Great, another segment this year to hear BK build up a Mizzou program. Football first, now basketball. It's going to end with the same result. It'll end in despair. First of all, not nice. Second of all, I'm not telling you this Mizzou team is going to end up in the national championship game. Although one of the teams that pulled off something like this, North Carolina back in 2022, they did end up in the national championship game, although they lost.
I'm expecting Elite 8.
I'm just telling you that this team is relevant. They're interesting. We talked about this with T-Bone on our group chat last night. Illinois in football this year was what Missouri is in basketball right now. It's an unexpected good season. And those are the best kinds of years. The 2023 football season for Mizzou was so much more enjoyable than this past season, although both were pretty similar in terms of the end result. And the reason why is because of expectations. When you go into a season expecting your team to be great, and then they're pretty good, it feels like a disappointment. And that's how Mizzou felt at times this season. When you go into the season having no clue what your team was going to be and realizing, okay, it could be really bad, and then they end up being pretty damn good, which is what Missouri is this year, what Illinois was in football. Dude, it's just pure joy. Every time you see them go out there and do something like beat Florida on the road or beat Kansas at home, play in a really close game against Illinois in the bragging rights game. Like, this is all just fun. It's found money for Mizzou fans. So if you can't enjoy that, man, hey, I don't know how you're going to be able to enjoy college sports.
Yeah, for what last year was in terms of this team, every SEC game, you're like, cool, this will be a loss for Mizzou. I don't even care if they get bounced in the first round of the tournament. I just want a relevant basketball team to watch. I didn't even watch games last year because I realized what the team was. I stayed at Enterprise Center last night to watch the rest of that second half because Mizzou was relevant.
The other thing about college basketball, when your team is relevant, when your team is good and you start thinking towards the NCAA tournament, you start watching other teams teams because you're curious where they fit in amongst those other teams. When your team sucks, man, the whole sport just becomes an afterthought.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
So that's one of the nice things about your team being in it, your team being involved, especially once you get to the tournament. And now you're like, okay, what's it look like path-wise for my team to potentially be able to go on a run? So it's a fun year for Mizzou. They are now ranked 33rd in the KenPom rankings, which is tied for the highest that they've been under Dennis Gates. This is a really good team. Not a great one, but a pretty damn good team with the potential to not only get to the tournament, but clearly, based on them beating Kansas and last night beating Florida, the potential to beat whoever is in front of them. With Alex and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. But next, we'll talk to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, about what he saw from the Blues last night. And does he think there's a fix to these third-line problems? Talk to Kerbs about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Man, the cold hasn't changed. How cool is it to look outside and still see snow on the ground? So if you're like Joey V and you've got an ice rink in your backyard, you can still use it. But when you come inside, you want to make sure that your house is warm. You want to make sure that it's comfortable. You want to make sure that it is exactly how you want it to be. And if you're like me, I keep it at 71 in the summer, the spring, the fall, and the winter. I want to make sure that that furnace is working well right now. So I called Classic Air Care. They came out. They did a maintenance check on it about a month and a half ago. They cleaned it out. They vacuumed it out. They made sure the temperature variances were perfect, and it is getting me perfectly through the summer. It's an 8-year-old unit, and I'm maintaining it just like you'd rotate your tires or you would change the oil on your car. Classic Air Care will do the same for you. Now, when that thing breaks down, and it will at some point because it's a machine, I know I can call them. They're going to come right out to the house, and they're going to get it fixed. And, folks, even during these winter months, they've got a 24/7 hotline. So if it's after hours, call them. They know they need to make you comfortable. It's Classic Air Care. They're going to take care of you the way they take care of me, the way they take care of the Alex Ferrario family and his parents' family. They've been dealing with them for over 30 years. Call Classic Air Care. Get them out to your house now. Make sure that unit's running well. You can book an appointment online at classicaircare.com.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Nice win for the Blues last night as they take down a team they're battling for with position in the playoff standings. 2-1 over the Calgary Flames. Colton Parayko picked up his 9th goal of the year. Reddick Fox the game-winning goal, his 3rd of the season, as the Blues are victorious over the Flames in the first of 2 meetings back-to-back against the Flames. They improved to 21-20-4 on the season, 46 points, just 3 points behind Calgary for that final wild card spot in the Western Conference. And lucky for them, they're back at it again against Calgary, looking to gain even more ground on the Flames tomorrow, as it'll be a 6 o'clock pregame, 7 o'clock puck drop right here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN. And then last night in college hoops, a big win for Missouri, 83-82 over the number 5 team in the nation, Florida. They improved to 3-1 in SEC play, 14-3 overall on the season. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Thompson hotline to be joined by Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He was on the call last night for the Blues win against the Calgary Flames in what is effectively a 2-game series right now in the middle of the season against Calgary for the potential to fight your way back into that final wild card spot, or at least the conversation for it. Kerbs joins us now on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. What was your biggest takeaway from that 2-1 win last night at Enterprise?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways you've got to look at is welcome to playoff caliber hockey. Now, I don't think it was clean like a playoff game. I don't know that the intensity is really even in the level yet that you're going to get when you actually do get to a playoff series. But I thought you saw 2 teams that knew what was on the line. Calgary knows we've got a playoff spot right now. We've got 2 games in hand. And if we win these 2 games, or even if we split them, we do a really good job of keeping them a pretty good distance in the rearview mirror of at least 5 and potentially 9 points. The Blues go into that going, this could be our season. You know, you're 9 points behind Colorado for the second wild card spot. You're 5 points behind Calgary, who has 2 games in hand. And if you happen to slip on a banana peel and not pick up 4 points, you could be at that point 9 points out of the second wild card spot. And as we've seen, I mean, they haven't made up 9 points on a team in the last 2 months, right? So these were critical games, and I thought that kind of the play of that game showed that, and that's one of the biggest takeaways, and that's why I like Jim Montgomery's comment about the one thing he liked about it is he showed that how they could play and win a 2-1 game when they needed to.
Kerbs, I think it's important to take victory laps when you are correct, and so you and I are going to take one together in this NASCAR.
God, this is going to be insufferable.
The dog in the game last night, in my opinion, was Colton Parayko. He has now 7 even-strength goals on the season, which is tied for 3rd most in the National Hockey League amongst defensemen. Are we seeing a Colton Parayko who many around the NHL have viewed as just kind of a top pair defenseman emerge into that next tier of players?
Well, okay, listen, let's not have too much revisionist history here, though, okay? Let's be fair to certain things. First off, I agree with you. We've been telling people even a few years ago when Colton was injured with his back and not playing really well that, like, easy, like, this is a really good defenseman. Like, he's an elite defenseman in the National Hockey League. But if because of that injury, and, I mean, guys, he was playing hockey like 30 games with herniated discs in his back, okay? Unbelievable, right? All right. The play was not good because of that, right? And then the team started the downhill spiral. And when that happens, defensemen look even more awful. So I can understand critiques in his game, right? Now, in all fairness, it was never as bad as some people said. What you're seeing now is just the confidence of a 10-year player in the National Hockey League that just knows how good he can be. And I also think you're seeing the benefits of Jim Montgomery's system coming through here, you know, where the way he wants the defense to activate and that freedom to do it. And I'm not saying, like, guys, the biggest difference is Drew Bannister wanted the team to play defensively just as Jim Montgomery did, right? But there's that balance of how that turns into offense, and Jim Montgomery's system is turning that into offense, and Colton Parayko is being a big part of it. Look, we asked Doug Armstrong before the season, what do other general managers talk about when they talk about Colton Parayko? He goes, well, I'll tell you this, everybody at Hockey Canada knows who he is, right? And had the NHL players gone to the last Olympics, Colton Parayko was going to be on Team Canada. Okay? That's not by coincidence. The guy can skate. And I'm going to go back to something else, and this is why I like that second unit. When you've got somebody, and you've got two defensemen, you know, whether it be a Fowler and a Parayko or a Falk and a Parayko, that you can use on the power play. And the reason is they need it out there. I think teams have to defend Colton's shot differently. The reality for me is this is a guy that played on your second power play unit as a fourth-year defenseman in the league when you went on to win a Stanley Cup. Okay, the reason he hasn't been on the power play since is you bring in guys like Torrey Krug and Justin Falk. Okay, so I think situationally that, along with the fact that he's so good defensively, has probably stunted some of that offensive growth from him. Now, like, he's not going to be a 60, 70-point defenseman, right? But I've talked to coaches that believe that if this guy saw regular power play time, you're talking about a 50-point player. And I think you're probably seeing that. So I think it's just awesome to see. He's the anchor of this defensive core, and it's not going to be too long where he becomes the all-time leader in games played for a defenseman with the St. Louis Blues. And he has the chance to probably, if he can stay healthy, be the first St. Louis Blue to play in 1,000 games for the franchise.
Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. He joins us weekly here on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, I did want to ask you about the ceiling for this team, I suppose, is the best way to frame it, because I was looking this up earlier today. We are now through 45 games, and the Blues at this point in their season, if you just look where they're at record-wise, 21, 20, and 4. So I wanted to find out, all right, who are the teams recently that have been at a similar spot through 45 games that did end up making the playoffs? There were a couple that immediately kind of jumped off the page. One was that 2020-2021 team that through 45 games was 20, 19, and 6. That was that Hoffman team. That was fine. They ended up getting swept in the playoffs, but they got there. They did end up making the postseason. They had basically the same goal differential at this point of the season as this Blues team does. The other comparison that I thought was maybe even more interesting, 2023, the Florida Panthers. Now, they ended up going to the Cup. I don't know if this team has that kind of a run in them, but whatever. At this point in the season, they were 21, 20, and 4. Basically the same as what the Blues are right now. Had a very similar goal differential as well. Later on that year, they had a 6-game winning streak. They won 6 out of 7. My question to you is this, Kerbs. This has been done very recently by other teams. They're at this point in the season. They've got a similar record. They go on a run. Does this team have that in them, in your opinion? And if so, what needs to happen for them to be able to do so?
I think they do have it in them. I think they have key pieces in the right spot to do so. If they didn't have the goaltending that they have, I'd say no, they don't. So that's, to me, where it starts. I look at a defensive core, you know, and a top 4 grouping that they have, and do they have the offensively dynamic guy like a Cale Makar, you know, or an Adam Fox? No, but not every team does. And by the way, not every team that wins the Stanley Cup does either. Or otherwise, these guys would win every year, right? So they've got a really solid defensive core, and I'm excited to continue to see Nick Leddy back out there, and it's still going to be a little ways for him, a few weeks as he's trying to still regain strength. But man, if that happens, there's something there. There's an intangible here, BK, and to me, when you're around the team, you hear like the way these players are talking, the way they're understanding, the way they're carrying themselves. You're getting back to that business-like next game mentality, and they're just going to have to find a way to claw their way to a decent winning streak to really fully believe in it. But I truly believe that all the pieces are there for that. Now the question is can it come together in time? And man, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that the future is not now for the St. Louis Blues, okay? Can this team make the playoffs? Yes. Could this team even make some noise in the playoffs? Yeah, I actually think they probably could because of those pieces, right? And that's an important step. But with the pieces still coming down the line, you're seeing the beginning of the build, of the true, like they're done with the retool. Now they're building, if that makes sense. Yep. And that's what you're seeing right now.
Kerbs, a final one from me. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but if I were to ask you to pick one player, not a goaltender, who you think is going to be key for this team to push for a playoff spot, who would you say?
You know, I think the answer to that question for me is Robert Thomas. It's Robert Thomas. And the reason is, and this isn't about contract or length of contract and whatever. It's truly about the position. When you grow into a number one center position in the National Hockey League and have the ability that Robert Thomas is showing, to me, this team is going to be ready to fly. And again, this just takes time too, guys. This isn't saying he's scuffing it. This isn't saying he's dogging it. This isn't saying he's doing something wrong. This is part of the development process, right? When the Blues got Ryan O'Reilly, he's 10 years in the league. Robert Thomas isn't even there yet, right? So what I mean by that, though, is you're seeing a project where if Robert Thomas starts to lead the team in takeaways in the defensive zone and killing some plays, right, from a forward standpoint, if he really starts to hold on to the puck a little bit more, maybe try a little less, high risk or low percentage plays, but really help control that possession even more in the offensive zone. He's shown that he's moving into the elite category of faceoff men in the National Hockey League. I fully believe that this guy is tracking to be part of Selke conversations, right? And while I don't think that's going to happen this year, I think he's starting to put himself in that conversation. And so for me, if this team's going to go, it's going to be Robert Thomas that, to me, is the one that's the head of the snake that pulls them into this thing and does it. And I think they've got the coaching staff, and he's got the coachability and the willingness to do it. And that's the storyline for me over the second half of the season.
Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. He joins us weekly here on BK and Ferrario. You'll be able to hear him tomorrow night right here on 101 ESPN, your home of the Blues, for the Blues versus the Flames. Huge game there. Huge game as well on Saturday against Utah. And all of that right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Kerbs, we appreciate the time as always, man. Great conversation today. We'll talk with you again next week.
All right, cheers, guys. Have an awesome week.
See you, Kerbs. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. In 15 minutes, I want to talk with Alex about what he talked about with Kerbs, about Colton Parayko. Has he emerged as a legit number one defenseman, even if he doesn't get into the Selke Trophy conversation, or excuse me, the Norris Trophy conversation this year? Can he be a legit number one defenseman based on how his peers and evaluators across the league look at him? We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. Questions and answers coming up next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. This weekend in the NFL, I love a specific bet. I love the Commanders on the money line against the Lions. I know it's risky. I think at 4.5 to 1, it's worth the price, though. Over in that game as well. I think you're going to get a shootout. And I like the Bills on the money line, Alex, against the Ravens. So you put that together, put it in a parlay. I know this is your favorite thing. You do it over on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois. $20 wager wins you $380. And here's the thing. If you made that exact same bet over on FanDuel, you win $315. You're winning more when you bet with Circa Sports in Illinois.
This is why you need to download that app for the NFL playoff race. You've got the college football championship, hockey, of course, in the middle of the season. Whatever the bets you're looking for, Circa Sports is the way to go because you're bringing in the most money possible. They've got those tight money line splits. BK just told you about those big parlays. They're so confident in what they offer that they tell you to go check out other sports betting apps because they know they'll be back once you compare those lines. So check them out today. Download the Circa Sports Illinois app. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers on 101 ESPN.
399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. You can also get those in over on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. All right, let's start out with this, Alex. Who is the best option for the Chicago Bears as their head coach? The question the texter asks, should they go with an offensive coordinator or somebody that was already an established head coach? It is worth noting, news coming out of Chicago just a little bit ago. They have officially completed an interview in person with Mike McCarthy, and according to the report, they flew him private to Chicago.
So Mike McCarthy's the next Bears coach.
Which is, according to this report, a departure from previous team policy. Apparently, they used to take the cheap route and made people fly on their own dime to come interview for their job.
They said they wined and dined them?
Yeah.
As Kevin Malone says in The Office, wined and dined and... Can't finish the end of that one. But anyway, if you're asking me, would I go offensive coordinator or established head coach? I'd go offensive coordinator. I know you want the established coach, and it seems like this team, what I want is I want a young, bright mind that can come in and get the best out of my offense. Because let's be honest, what's the Chicago Bears' advantage right now? It's Caleb Williams, all of these weapons that they have on the offensive side. You've got a good defense, and you bring in the right defensive coordinator, it can work with that. I need somebody who can get the best out of Caleb Williams, and I I am not all aboard the Mike McCarthy train.
Yeah, you know my policy on this. If you can go get Ben Johnson, get Ben Johnson. That's the number one option that I would have on the top of my board. The offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, he's done everything he can there. I have no idea if he can lead a team. I don't know how anybody could possibly say with any certainty whether or not it'll work. We've seen top hot shot coordinators go on to have a ton of success. We've also seen other guys that weren't super great as coordinators go on to have success, and guys that were really good as coordinators go on to fail spectacularly. Looking at you, Josh McDaniels, it doesn't always work, but it's worth a shot. So that would be my number one choice. If he tells you no, which is possible, that's where things get really dicey. I don't think there is an obvious number 2 candidate on the board now that Mike Vrabel has gone to the Patriots. I think Vrabel would have been an interesting guy there, but personality-wise, I just don't know if it would have made sense with Caleb Williams. And that's where I think you get to the place where it's like, okay, what is our number one goal over the next 3 years? And if we're being honest, the number one goal for the Chicago Bears, right or wrong, is not winning the Super Bowl in the next 3 years.
What?
The number one goal is to make sure Caleb Williams is good. That's it. Because then you've got 15 years of a window to potentially win a Super Bowl. The number one goal is to make that guy work in Chicago, to have a franchise quarterback for the first time that you developed in 40 years. So if that means hiring Pete Carroll, if that means hiring Mike McCarthy, it's not going to get anybody excited, nor should it. But it might be the best thing for the long-term future of the franchise, even if you acknowledge, yeah, this guy's probably not going to be here in 4 years when we try to take that next step. But right now, it's baby steps for the Bears. That organization has been dysfunctional for a decade. It's time for them to go out there and get a grown adult to start leading their locker room. And I think those guys can both do the job.
Yeah. If it were me, I would go Pete Carroll before I would go Mike McCarthy. I just don't trust Mike McCarthy for what took place in Dallas. Now, maybe that's a lot more Jerry Jones than Mike, and maybe I'm not being fair to Mike McCarthy, but I don't know if I trust him with that young group.
All right, let's get to the next question from the 636. Which team do you believe has a stronger future, Mizzou basketball or Mizzou football? I would go football.
I would go football as well. I think if you got this quarterback that you believe is going to be the next big thing, that's going to give you, 3 solid years with him if he doesn't enter the draft, 2 to 3. I would say that one. I mean, Dennis Gates, this is incredible if they can do that this season, but it's going to be all transfer portal with Dennis Gates.
Yeah. I think it's football because we've seen it put into practice more than we've seen it with Mizzou basketball. It's been a good year so far for Mizzou basketball. I have no idea what the rest of the season is going to hold. I've now seen back-to-back seasons from Mizzou that appear to be not just stabilization, but taking it to the next level. And now this offseason, we'll talk about this a little bit more coming up later on in the show, Mizzou right now has a top 5 transfer portal class, including the second best defensive player that was in the portal. He committed to Mizzou yesterday, a defensive end from Georgia. They beat out Ohio State for this kid, man. That's not a small thing to beat out the team that is about to play for the national championship game that is willing to offer the money, as we saw last year when they got Caleb Downs via the portal. So I've been unbelievably impressed by what both programs have been able to do under their current head coaches. But if I had to say one team that had the higher ceiling, I would go with Mizzou football as opposed to basketball. The university also appears to be willing to invest a little more on the football side of things.
Why
which
would
makes
that
sense.
be?
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. Last thing here, Alex, from the 314. If you were Doug Armstrong, would you call Vancouver and ask about Brock Besser or be interested in him as a free agent? Is Besser a free agent?
Yeah, he's a free agent after this year. I would call to see if I could trade for him and what it would take, because when you get into the going after free agency, you're going to have to pay more than you want to do. And I don't know if the Blues are in the position to go into a bidding war via free agency. And frankly, I don't know if Brock Besser is that guy that you go pay $8 million to.
I'm good.
I think he's a top-line winger. I mean, he's
Here
shown
are his
it.
goals by year, Alex. 29, 26, 16, 23, 23, 18, 15, 40. One of these things is not like the other. He had a career year last year for them, and nobody can take that away. He also had a 20% shooting percentage, which we'll see if that's sustainable. This year he's at 23, so maybe he's just one of the best shooters in the NHL.
He's got a hell of a shot.
But I would bet against it, and I will say, no, I'm good not giving him that $8 million per year. This is a consistent 50 to 55 point producer until last season when suddenly he got to 73, and now he's back on pace to have 55 this year.
Yeah.
So I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't need to be paying that.
I think there's better options available to you if you're looking for a top line player that's a difference maker that you're going to have to trade a lot for.
Grant, out of curiosity, you have interest in Brock Besser?
Not really. And I was looking at some of the stats too, because I saw that text as well. And, over the last few years, not so much this year because he's been a lot better, but Jordan Kyger's caught a lot of flack for this. But Elias Pettersson this season is a -3. Brock Besser is a -6. He was a -20 2 years ago. Like, obviously, that's not a defensively reliable player. And so I think he's going to cause more headaches than he would, solve problems with offensive production if you have him on your team.
I think you have Brock Besser light already on your team with Jake Neighbors. I don't know
or Dylan Holloway.
Yeah, I don't know that Besser. I think Holloway is potentially a better player than Brock Besser.
Maybe.
I think that what you have with Jake Neighbors, pretty similar in terms of the overall production. Maybe not the same shot, to your point, Alex, as to what you have with Besser, but that physical, like, power forward that you want. Production-wise, man, like 26, 29, 16, 23, 23 goal production. That's kind of what I'm anticipating from Jake Neighbors, and I don't have to pay $8 million for that. So
if
I'll stick with Neighbors.
If I'm the Blues, I'm looking for the tier above that. And frankly, if I'm them, I'm gonna be waiting and see if the Ottawa Senators do something with
above
Brady
or
Tkachuk.
below. I'll go either direction, but I'm not shopping in that bin. That is a Cardinals move in every sense. That is hey, we need somebody that can masquerade as a top line winger. I think this guy could maybe do it. And then you get him for top line winger money, and he produces like a middle six forward, and now you're frustrated for the next 6 years.
To put this into context, like for Blues fans, this is a Paul Stastny move. And this is no disrespect to Paul Stastny because I love Paulie Walnuts, but they signed him when he was a free agent from Colorado to be a number one center, and these were his numbers when he was with the Blues. 46 points, 49 points, 40 points, 40 points.
Let me put this another way. Would you be happy if you went out this offseason and signed Braden Shin to an 8-year, $8 million deal?
No.
The Braden Shin that you acquired when you did?
No.
Because that is effectively what Brock Besser is in terms of his production, what he's been, but on the wing instead of at center.
Yeah. I need more. I need something that's the next level. And to me, like, the next level is like the way I'm projecting this is I need a dude who is up there with Robert Thomas every single game.
He's Alex. That's Grant. I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Colton Parayko. Alex believes that he has emerged as a legitimate number one defenseman. Now, he's believed that for 7 years, but now he's really a number one defenseman. He'll tell you why next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and Grant on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. T-Bone out for another day. He'll be back in with us tomorrow. He enjoyed the Illinois win last night, Alex.
Did he?
He went to that game, so we are excited to have him back in studio tomorrow. But for right now, we've got Grant Francis, which is great because we got a Blues conversation to have. Colton Parayko, according to Alex Ferrario, my dear friend, the biggest supporter of Colton Parayko over the years, has emerged as a legitimate number one center. And Alex, there are actually numbers right now that would support your case on that. If you look at what he's done while he's been on the ice this year, he's tied for 17th among all defensemen in 5-on-5 point production. More impressive, so far this year, there are only 3 defensemen with more 5-on-5 goals than Parayko has. He's averaging 24 minutes a night. He's on pace for 15 goals and 45 points. All of those would be career highs for him. Alex, what's changed? What has led to him having this kind of a career year?
I think it's a little bit of two things. One slice of the pie is the coach, because I believe Jim Montgomery, and he has spoken so highly of him since he's taken over, sees more to Parayko's game and wants him to get involved in that way. And no coincidence that 5 of his 9 goals this season have come since Jim Montgomery has taken over. He's got tied for the 5th most goals amongst defensemen overall since Jim Montgomery has taken over. He's plus 10, which tells you that he's even better defensively. He's got 14 points and a plus 10. I don't know if you guys do that math correctly, but when you're defensive, that means you're on the ice for goals going in and not on the ice for goals going against. So that's the Colton Parayko side of it, but the part of what's changed, the other side of it, is I feel like Colton Parayko's taken that step in terms of confidence of, I can do anything that they need me to do. Because in the past, it's felt like, well, I don't want to jump in offensively because if I do, I'm going to be a liability defensively and I'm going to make mistakes. Now it's just like, yeah, I could play the forward position just as much as I could play the defensive position. I'm bigger, I'm faster, I'm stronger than most of these guys out there. There was a play last night against that Martin Pospisil who came in on Parayko. And I am not joking with you. Colton Parayko was going one-on-one with him, put one hand on Pospisil's shoulder, and pushed him against the boards and basically shoved him backwards. So it feels like Parayko has found that like man strength that says, I'm better than you in this circumstance. He's just playing with the mindset of a number one defenseman. So for me, I think a lot of this is Parayko just taking that next step, but it's Jim Montgomery telling him, like, dude, don't be a defenseman. We need you to be everything right now. And for him, when you're playing the most minutes, not getting power play time, you're producing on the offensive side of things, that's everything you ask for a number one defenseman.
How much of this is also the pairing partner of Cam Fowler? Because you look at the Blues when they had Colton Parayko with Ryan Suter. They were, listen, man, credit to Ryan Suter. He's like 45 years old, and he's out there playing top pair minutes. That in and of itself is an accomplishment. But he's an underqualified top pair defenseman, and he would probably tell you that at this point in his career. He wasn't having the most success up there, and the Blues weren't having the most success when those two were on the ice together. They were outscored 23-19 at 5-on-5 when it was Suter and Parayko on the ice together. When it was Leddy and Parayko on the ice together, they were outscored 5-2. When it's been Parayko with Justin Falk out there on the ice this year, outscored 2-0.
God, the guy has literally been a revolving door for D partners.
Cam Fowler, though, the Blues have outscored the opposition 12-9. And if you look at any of the underlying numbers, they've outshot the opposition. And this is when the Blues are going up against the top lines. That's what Colton Parayko plays, is the most difficult minutes that you can possibly get. Last year, according to The Athletic, he played the most difficult minutes of any defenseman in the NHL. It was him and Robert Thomas that were right up there. They've outshot their opposition 97-80 with Parayko and Fowler on the ice together at 5-on-5. So I'm with you. Part of it is Jim Montgomery. Part of it is him raising his game to the next level. How much, though, is about Kim Fowler coming in and stabilizing things, giving him a real top pair defenseman to go along with him now?
I think that's just as much a part of this slice of the pie, because you haven't had a top pair defenseman play with Colton Parayko, honestly, since Jay Bouwmeester's retired. Think about beyond the guys that you just mentioned, the Mikolas, the Vince Dunns. Like, you've gone through the ringer in terms of guys that they've tried to find to be the pairing mate with Colton Parayko. And the hope was that Philip Broberg was going to be that guy. And maybe in a couple of years he is. But for now, they went out there and acquired somebody who is a top pair defenseman who can play in that role that allows Colton Parayko to go about his business. Because when you've got that safety blanket of the guy you know that is going to be in the position if I pin pinch, that helps out. Typically in the past, it's been the guy that's supposed to be in that position is also kind of trying to figure out how to work with Colton Parayko. I mean, since Fowler has been acquired, 15 games they've played together, they have produced a total of 20 points and are a plus 12. So that is a top pairing. And it's not just a shutdown pair. It's not an offensive pair. That is a all-around game pair. So, yeah, I think a lot of this is Cam Fowler's play, too. When you get somebody who knows how Colton Parayko plays and takes on those same duties and is with a guy who can play to the elite level, it makes Cam Fowler's game look better.
I also think they've just gone through so many different types that have gone along with Colton Parayko, right? Like, over the years, I remember we talked to Doug Armstrong about this. I think it was 2 years ago now. Maybe it would have even been 3. But we talked about him. Hey, what's the ultimate pairing partner look like for Colton Parayko? Not a name, not a specific player, but like when you think about what it would look like, what attributes would that player have? And he talked about it, and he mentioned, like, hey, you know, we've seen it with some puck movers. We've seen it with, like, a Marco Scandella type. We've seen a lot of different types with him. But he said, yeah, I think it might be somebody that looks kind of like Scott Perunovich. You know, a true puck-moving defenseman on the back end, like Krug, Perunovich, that style of a defenseman. And I think what they came to the conclusion of was, we need a guy that can move the puck, but Parayko has a little bit more of an offensive game maybe than they gave him credit for. And they want him to be more involved in the offense. Therefore, you need a guy that can do both. You need them to be able to kind of play off of one another. And I think they found that in Cam Fowler, who can move the puck. He's kind of Nick Leddy-ish in that regard. But he's also got a little bit of size to him. Like, he's kind of an all-around, really solid player. I don't think there's any one thing that you look at Cam Fowler and say, that guy's great at this. But he's really good at pretty much everything. And I think I would say stumbled into, I think they would say found the right guy to be able to be paired with him. And it took a lot of failures to be able to get there. But finally, I think they found the prototype of what actually works with Parayko. It's a big body that can move the puck, but can also be good in his own zone when necessary as well. And that's ultimately what Cam Fowler has provided.
You need a two-way defenseman to play with Colton Parayko because he's a two-way defenseman. Joey talks about this all the time on pregame. Basically, what you're seeing from Parayko right now is positionless hockey. He's not a defenseman to where he only stays at the blue line and he takes slap shots and then he plays defense. He'll go around the net. Jim Montgomery has basically given him the freedom to say, dude, go skate up. Look at the goal he scored last night. He skates in on that because he realizes the puck is loose. He goes right up to the faceoff dot and takes a shot. He had a wraparound attempt last night. If I'm the Blues, I'm looking at Colton Parayko and saying, hey, you want to do the power play? Let's put you in front of the net because you're 6'6" and you got a shot that can do some damage. He's a positionless player. And the problem, I think, of what happened, and this is why I kind of have some tone and snark when I say, like, people have been saying against Colton Parayko for the longest time. Look at how it's been segmented. Stanley Cup, year after the Stanley Cup, he was back-to-back 10 goals in the season. Really good player. COVID, back injury, recovering from back injury, really bad team. Then it got a little bit better. That was last season. And now look at where he's at right now. And this is the evolution of a defenseman in the National Hockey League. But because they're giving him the freedom to play positionless hockey and they know he's responsible, it allows him to have a little bit more freedom to do some more. And that's why you're seeing him he's got 44 shots since Jim Montgomery has taken over. Wow. He's shooting the puck a lot more than what he typically does.
To put it a little bit into perspective, too, with some numbers, just how good he's been on both sides of the ice. Like, last season, Colton Parayko led the NHL in blocked shots. This season, he's one of 7 defensemen that has 100 on the year.
Wow.
Out of those 7 defensemen, he leads those 7 with 24 points.
Wow.
So and there's only like everything. 2 that have more than 20.
Yeah.
It's like being, he's not this guy because this guy's the best player in the NBA right now, but he's kind of like Nikola Jokic of the NBA. Where
it looks like him a little bit.
Nikola Jokic is a guy that can go out there and get you a triple-double on any given night. Like, he's averaging for the season pretty close to a triple-double. And it reminds me, that positionless hockey that you're talking about, Alex, it's what's happened in basketball for the last decade. Like, things have just shifted. And now, instead of a big man being a guy that you just put in the dunker spot, your big men have to be able to distribute. They've got to be able to play out. They've got to be able to shoot. They've got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And you're seeing some of that trickle into the NHL right now, especially when it comes to defensemen.
By the way, I just found this interesting. Can you guess the other defenseman in the NHL right now that has over 100 blocks and over 20 points?
No chance. I'm going to be able to get this. So, Alex?
Petrangelo?
Travis Sanheim.
Huh. Another guy that the Blues are interested in.
That was the guy that they were trying to put with Colton Parayko.
There you go.
And I think the future is going to be Broberg with Parayko, but now you've got a 2-year or 1.5-year window to allow Broberg to continue to develop while Cam Fowler plays with Parayko.
You know what's interesting? I don't know if I feel that way. For the same reasons that I kind of like what they've done in splitting up Thomas and Kyrou, I like having two pairings that are really good and they're held up, they're propped up by one of the two players. So if that means, you've got a 7 out of 10 next to Colton Parayko, and I've got a 10 out of 10 as my defenseman that's going to be out there in that second pair, I've always got a dude that I trust on the ice. For like 50 minutes in every game, I've got a dude out there that I really, really want out there.
That's how the Blues did it with Pronger and McKennis. One would play 30 minutes, the other would play 30 minutes, and you'd have an entire hockey game taken care of.
I think that's a really smart way to go about it. Yep. And I like the way that the Blues have operated there. I know early on this season, we both wanted him to be a part of that top pair, but now that I've seen it implemented the way that they have, I think it actually makes more sense to do it this way. All right, he's Alex Ferrario, that's Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, the Cubs seems to be having a really similar offseason to what the Cardinals would typically do. What do we make of that? We'll get into that coming up at 12:30. NFL Quick Hitters is next here on 101 ESPN. let's dive into some NFL quick hitters with Alex Ferrario and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on a 101 ESPN. Saw this article earlier today, Alex, over on The Athletic. Wanted to get your thoughts on it. Of the teams that missed the playoffs this year, who is most likely to rebound and get back to the postseason in 2025? I'll give you their top 5 teams. I'm curious where you would land.
Okay.
They had Cincinnati at number 1.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Makes sense.
Yeah.
The Dallas Cowboys at number 2.
Yeah.
We'll see. The fighting Deons, I'm not sure.
They're not going to be the Deons.
We'll see. The Miami Dolphins at number 3. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Tyreek Hill. He said he's out, and then he's back in. We'll see on that.
He's back, dog.
Seattle Seahawks at number 4, and then the Atlanta Falcons they had at number 5. Those were their top 5 teams. I was surprised to see San Francisco all the way down at number 7, but whatever. Who would be your number 1 team most likely to get into the playoffs next year that missed it this season?
Mine would be Cincinnati. I think they're spot on with that one. I like Dallas at 2. I was actually thinking I would put the Atlanta Falcons at 3 because I think now that they've got the Michael Penix thing, I think that's going to actually help them moving forward. One that they didn't have on the list that I'm curious your thoughts on are the Indianapolis Colts. There was a little shade that I just threw you when I said that. But, I mean, when they're not making any changes, which is a little questionable in terms of the coach.
Fired their DC. So
okay, so no changes really that are going to impact the team. But
their DC was horrific. I think to answer your question directly, can they make the playoffs next year? Yes, but it requires Anthony Richardson to be a very different quarterback than he was this season. And you know, I'm Anthony Richardson's biggest fan, but this was a horrible season for him, man. He's got all the attributes that you would want out of a franchise-level quarterback, except for the stuff that I don't see day to day. It sure sounds like the people inside of that locker room don't really like him.
Oh, that's good.
They don't seem to think that he works very hard. And if you don't have those qualities, dude, you can't be a franchise quarterback. Like, if they are out on him and they don't think that it's going to get better, they should trade him this offseason. Like, they should look to move him to the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Las Vegas Raiders or whoever is willing to take him, because you can't go out there again this season, put out the exact same products and expect to get anything in return. Right now, there's still some unknown with Anthony Richardson. Next year, that's gone.
Yeah.
Next year, you become the Cardinals trying to trade one of your young prospects that you waited on too long. See Carlson, Dylan. They can't have that happen for the Indianapolis Colts, but I do not think they will make the playoffs next year. They would not be in my top 3. I like Cincinnati. You know that. I would have San Francisco higher, though.
Yeah,
I think San Francisco's Super Bowl contending window might be coming to a close, but their contention window to get to the playoffs, I think, is very much still open.
And you know who should drop out of it for San Francisco or the Seattle Seahawks?
Sure.
I don't see. I mean, if you're sticking with Geno Smith, don't think that's the quarterback. They've got the offensive weapons, but I always think they're going to be the little brother to the Rams and the 49ers.
Minnesota might too. Like, Minnesota had a great year this year, and this is not me downplaying anything that they accomplished. It's really hard to be that good consistently, especially when you have Sam Darnold at quarterback this year, and next year a rookie probably taking over for him effectively. So I think there are other teams that will emerge in the NFC. That's the easier conference to see, okay, whenever you do this, it's not only who's getting in, but also who are you pulling out. In the AFC, well, I think the Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Chargers, and Texans probably are all going to get back into the playoffs next year. They've got stud-level quarterbacks. Yes, I still think Justin Herbert's really good. And they've got really good coaches. So I think those guys are going to get back in. So you got two spots to work with in the AFC. NFC, you've got a little bit more wiggle room potentially.
I was surprised that the Falcons were that low at 5. I think just with that division, I would have had them with Cincinnati 1 and 2. But one team that I found interesting because they were pretty much right there until the very last couple of weeks this season were the Arizona Cardinals. Where were they on that list?
The Arizona Cardinals on this list were number 6.
Okay.
Falcons at 5, Cardinals at 6, 49ers 7, and then to finish out the top 10, Panthers 8, Colts 9, Bears at number 10. The New England Patriots were at number 11 on this. Can I make a case?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Aside from
Mike Vrabel's an unbelievable head coach.
And Drake May was awesome.
I will feel next year, I'm telling you this right now, I'll get in early on this. I will feel about the Patriots next year the way that I felt about the Chargers this year. You went from incompetent coaching to top 10 coach in the NFL with Jim Harbaugh in the Chargers, and then now with Mike Vrabel with the Patriots. And you've got a really good young quarterback who has been in a horrible situation. If they add some competent pass catchers, improve that offensive line a little bit, and then just Vrabel takes over the defense and makes it better, that team could win 8-9 games next year. They could be next year's version of this year's Broncos. I could totally see that.
I'll make a bold prediction, tinfoil, whatever you want to call it. I think the Patriots are going to trade for either the second or third overall pick to get Travis Hunter.
Sure.
I think they're going to be very aggressive to try and get the wide receiver for Drake May so that Mike Vrabel's got everything you need to at least be competitive this season.
They should also be the number one bidders for T. Higgins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Add Travis Hunter and T. Higgins. Let's see what it looks like. And let Travis Hunter play corner or wide receiver, whatever he wants to do. But he's going to make the team both. Better. All right. Next thing that I wanted to get to here, Alex. Pro Football Talk wrote a piece earlier today on the remaining quarterbacks and how they were acquired by their respective teams. Now, some of these there's been movement, like Stafford and Jared Goff, both top overall picks, number one overall picks, but they flipped teams, right? You look at the rest of these teams that are remaining. Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall pick. CJ Stroud, number 2 overall pick. Josh Allen, number 7. Patrick Mahomes, number 10. And then there's Lamar Jackson, who dropped all the way to 32. If he was in this year's draft instead of when he was selected, the NFL has changed in how they view quarterbacks like Lamar. He would go top 5.
Oh, I think he'd go number 1.
Probably. He was unbelievable in college, and teams just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, all right, can that work in the NFL? And now, if you see a guy like Lamar, you want him number 1 overall. Like, look at Kyler Murray. Look at what they had last year with Jaden Daniels, who went number 2.
Yeah.
That's the prototype now. And then Jalen Hurts, number 53 overall pick in 2020. He had a weird profile, so he ended up dropping to the second round. He's the only guy that a team that's still remaining, the quarterback position, was able to get outside of the first round. And only 2 of them went outside of the top 10. What is the lesson to be learned there for other teams, Alex, if any, in your opinion?
I honestly, I think it's probably the fact that don't judge a quarterback by... Trying to think of the proper way to phrase this one. Like, you can't look at a quarterback and say, like, well, he's only a one-trick pony, he can't do anything else. Because I think some of these guys are a perfect example of, we see what his best assets are, we'll use that, but we can find a way to take advantage of some of the other aspects with him. Like, I think when you look at some of those guys, it seemingly was a one-trick pony, and I don't know how effective that's going to be in the NFL.
I want a different route. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's time. Get aggressive. You can't get this guy in the late first round. Like, you're just not going to find him.
Yeah.
Unless you're unbelievably lucky and a new Lamar Jackson comes around. Spoiler alert, it ain't happening.
Right.
It's never happened in the history of the NFL. It ain't happening again. You could try to get a Jalen Hurts. The reason why Philadelphia took him, though, was to back up Carson Wentz at the time. You're not doing that. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, go be aggressive. If you're a team that is currently looking for a quarterback, Tennessee, Las Vegas, etc., you better be aggressive to find that guy. And you're probably going to fail. You're probably going to fail a time, 2 times, maybe 3 times. But keep taking those shots because nothing else matters until you get that guy. And look at these teams that are remaining right now. It was a risk to take Jaden Daniels when they did. It was a risk for the Buffalo Bills to go get Josh Allen. It was a risk for the Chiefs to trade up from 27 to 10, including a future first-round pick, for Patrick Mahomes, who was seen as a huge project at the time. Hell, it was a risk for Baltimore to take Lamar Jackson. But guess what? It's paid off tenfold for all of these teams and their contenders because they were aggressive in addressing the most important position in the sport. If you're one of those teams that's out in the wilderness right now wondering, do we have the right guy at the position? You got to keep taking shots. Don't go cheap. Don't do what the New Orleans Saints have done for a decade since trying to replace Drew Brees. Not a decade, but the last 5 years. Go out there and get your guy.
Well, and to be, if you take those risks and it doesn't work out, you're in the exact same position that you were in before.
Bingo.
You're going to be drafting probably top 5, top 10, somewhere around there, and you go out there and you try and get the next guy.
And if you're the Steelers, even better, because then at least we know we're bad. Right now, the Steelers are patchworking this thing together to get to 9 wins every year, so they end up selecting 20th. So at least if you get this guy, he sucks. Well, now we're picking top 5, and we could go get the next guy.
Yeah.
Right? All right, he's Alex Ferrario. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we'll get into the junk drawer, but coming up next, are the Cubs doing this offseason what the Cardinals would typically do during an offseason? And if so, what does it say about where we're at in this division? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues pick up an important win last night as they defeat the Calgary Flames by a final of 2-1. Colton Parayko picked up his 9th goal of the season. Reddick Foxa had the game-winning goal, his 3rd of the year, as the Blues inch closer to that final wild card spot in the Western Conference. They now have 46 points on the year, just 3 back of the Calgary Flames, who currently hold that final wild card spot in the West, and they'll have a chance tomorrow to build on that. They're back against the Flames here on home ice. Pregame is 6 o'clock. Puck drop at 7 here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN. Then for the Missouri Tigers, yesterday also a big day for them. 83-82 winners over the number 5 team in the nation in Florida. They improved to 3-1 amongst SEC opponents, 14-3 overall this season for the Missouri Tigers. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alex, I think the Cubs are becoming the Cardinals. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I think that's what's happening. This offseason, they traded for Kyle Tucker. He's on an expiring deal. He's a really, really excellent baseball player. But I'm skeptical that they're going to get any kind of an extension done with Kyle Tucker. It sounds like it's going to be in the $400 million range, and I don't know that the Cubs are necessarily going to be willing to do that.
Man, the Cubs love spending money.
Now, other moves that the Cubs have made. They signed Matthew Boyd, who is just, man, the definition of a Cardinal starting pitcher acquisition. 2 years, $29 million to be like a number 4 starter for them.
That's Steven Matz, Kyle Gibson, 2.0.
Absolutely. Carson Kelly is now a Chicago Cub. Was a St. Louis Cardinal.
Right.
He is now a Chicago Cub.
Cardinals move.
Colin Ray is a Chicago Cub, 1 year, $5 million deal. And then they signed Caleb Thielbar, who previously was with the Minnesota Twins. He's 38 years old. He's making a couple $1 million.
That's a Cardinals move right there.
They had a very Cardinals offseason, and it continues as there is now a report from Bruce Levine of 670 The Score up in Chicago, who wrote the following. As third baseman Alex Bregman's free agency continues with his destination unknown, there could be a union with the Cubs down the road if he is willing to accept a shorter-term contract. Recently, Scott Boras, who represents Bregman, had casual discussions with the Cubs who aren't interested in a long-term contract, end quote. So there's a lot of disclaimers there, a lot of caveats, but it basically comes down to, hey, if Bregman's willing to do the thing that some of the guys did last year, especially Matt Chapman, take a 1-year contract with opt-out, so you get multiple years, but it's really effectively a 1-year deal, Cubs might be interested in doing something like that. Again, something that I think the Cardinals would do in a typical offseason. I'm going to read you off their current lineup, Alex. Ian Happ, solid player. Kyle Tucker, really good player. Seiya Suzuki, solid. Michael Busch, fine. Dansby Swanson, good. Nico Horner, good. Pete Crow Armstrong, solid. Matt Shaw, I don't know yet. And Miguel Amaya, who was a big-time prospect, but really hasn't emerged with any of the status that we thought he was going to be when he took over as their catcher. It is the most Cardinals lineup that you could possibly ask for.
Yep.
Just a bunch of really solid dudes up and down the lineup. Nobody other than Kyle Tucker that's a star, kind of similar to what the Cardinals have had in recent seasons, where you look at, okay, Arenado, okay, Goldie, yeah, if they hit well, you can see how the middle of this order looks. But around them, it's guys that are solid, but nobody that's spectacular. And you can even go to their rotation. I like Shota Imanaga a lot. I have no idea what a second season is going to look like as a full-time starter in Major League Baseball. I think Justin Steele's pretty damn good. But he's pretty damn good in the way that, like, the Cardinals have had really solid number 2 starters over the years. Jamison Tyon's fine. Matthew Boyd, okay. Javier Assad, when facing the Cardinals, is Cy Young. But anybody else, he's just solid.
Just filling those shoes of Kyle Hendricks.
Are the Cubs taking over as the new version of the Cardinals now that the Cardinals are going into a retool?
Yeah,
Alex?
they are, and they're doing it the right way. I mean, like, when you look at the NL Central, if you're the Cubs, it is up for grabs this year. You made the aggressive move to go get Kyle Tucker, and we've seen the Cardinals be aggressive in the past, whether you like to believe that or not. But then everything else that they've done, they're just like, yeah, we'll just add a couple of complementary pieces for this team so that we're just good enough. And frankly, if you're the Cubs, why wouldn't you do that? On paper, I'm picking that team over the Milwaukee Brewers. In real life, we probably all know what's going to happen. Milwaukee's going to go on some 90-game run, and you're thinking, how did this happen? But this is the Chicago Cubs looking at the market and saying, cool, let's take advantage of what other teams aren't willing to do. These guys are just sitting out there. We've got pieces that we believe are good enough. We just got Kyle Tucker, who's the superstar for us, and now we'll go just add a couple of other pieces.
But if you're doing this, go all in. Yeah. Not all the way into the point where they're, giving out hundreds of millions of dollars to somebody, but go make that extra push. Don't just be good enough to win the division. Actually be an interesting team in the National League.
But I think baseball teams don't look at that anymore that way. They just look at it as let's be good enough to get in because
Central teams.
Well, I mean, frankly,
the Dodgers look at it that way. The Padres look at it that way. I think the Diamondbacks look at it that way. I think the Mets look at it that way. I think the Phillies look at it that way. I think the Braves look at it that way.
It's the
Central Division where
I
they
feel
don't
like
look at it that way.
And honestly, I guess it is the National League because I was just going to say the National League views it that way because of the powerhouses that are the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Phillies. All these other teams are like, you know what? We'll just go out there and get some really good pieces so that we could compete. But you're right. I guess that really is just the NL Central because that's what the NL Central does.
Somebody asked on the text line, why did you just read off the Cubs lineup? Here's why. This is the point I'm trying to make. The Cubs right now are 13th in Major League Baseball in payroll. They're spending $178 million on their roster this year. In every possible way, they are recreating what the Cardinals have been. And the reason why I find that to be fascinating is because it failed. The Cardinals project did not work. What they were got them stuck in the middle and ended with them being better than anybody else, for the most part, in the Central, or right up there with the Milwaukee Brewers, and behind everybody that was a real contender from the NL West or the NL East. And where that leaves you is in no man's land. You're stuck because you're paying a lot, but not quite at the top tier. And you're good, but not good enough. And you're certainly not bad enough to get the star-level talent that you need in future seasons via the draft. And so you just end up kind of appeasing nobody. Your fans are left unfulfilled. Your ownership group leaves saying, why did we spend that much money to just be stuck in the middle and to not really have any success in the postseason? And you end up where the Cardinals are today, which is saying, let's just go ahead and go in retreat mode. That's what's coming for the Cubs. I don't know if it's this year. I don't know if it's next year. I don't know if it's 2 years down the road. But the Cubs will eventually come to the same conclusion that the Cardinals have, which is that version of building doesn't work. And I don't know why the Cubs decided to follow the Cardinals model after it failed here. It's a losing proposition to build the way that the Cubs are right now, and yet they seem to be making all of the same mistakes that the Cardinals did. Shopping in the mid-tier market, going out and making an aggressive move, and then stopping, just sitting on their hands the rest of the offseason. If the Cubs really want to get aggressive this offseason, the way that they do so is go sign Jack Flaherty. The way that they do so is go by getting Jack Flaherty, Kyle Tucker, and Alex Bregman, and then go and get Tanner Scott or something like that for your bullpen as well. That's how you get truly aggressive. The Cubs are just doing the pop gun offseason that the Cardinals have for the last decade, really. That got them into this mess that they're stuck with right now. So if you're a Cardinals fan and you want to see the downfall of the Cubs, I think you're watching it right now. It's not going to be that they lose 100 games. It's going to be that it's the slow death that you just experienced yourself, where everybody leaves saying, what the hell did we just do?
Yeah, well, and the way that really becomes a faster death is when you just walk away from the table with Kyle Tucker. Because if you're them, you know how you don't do what you're talking about is you re-sign Kyle Tucker, because that's the cornerstone piece. And now you're like, okay, well, we can find some good pieces, and eventually we can get more aggressive. But what's going to really kill off the Chicago Cubs, and it's why we've all said that the Cardinals wouldn't make moves like that, because they're not going to do what the Cubs aren't going to do. They're not going to re-sign them, and then it's like, well, what was the whole point of this? You went out there and you were aggressive for Kyle Tucker to say that, hey, we're the NL Central darlings this year, but then you're not going to go anywhere else with it. I love the Alex Bregman decision. That's how you be aggressive, but you're right.
Well, I also don't think they're going to do it.
I don't know if Bregman does it, to be honest with you.
I don't think it really makes a ton of sense for either side. I think they end up saying, you know what, somebody else can go make that move. Like the Tigers can go make that move. Or one of the teams, probably Boston, can go make that move. If he's going to go somewhere and take that nice pillow deal, Boston is the team that I think it ends up doing. And that screws the Cardinals. That's not a good situation for the Cardinals to potentially be in. All right. One other thing that I wanted to get to here, Alex, we talked about Arenado basically every day for the past 3 months. One thing that we really haven't done a lot of, which Cardinals fans are starting to speculate about, is the idea that it could be a package deal, not just with Arenado and like adding a sweetener, Eric Fetty or Ryan Helsley, to get rid of that money off of the books, but also making it into like a bigger package deal where Arenado is traded with a young player and Fetty or Helsley. And now instead of just getting a prospect or two in return, you get real players. So a Twitter account, Cardinals Live, put this out there the other day. Said Red Sox could receive Nolan Arenado and money from the Cardinals to pay down his contract with Ivan Herrera and Ryan Helsley. And in return, the Cardinals get Tristan Casas and Cutter Crawford. I don't know if this is something that the Cardinals would be interested or not. And honestly, like, set aside kind of the names that are attached to this as well. I think it kind of makes sense for what the return could be in a deal like this, but set those aside. Is this the kind of move that if you can't move on from Arenado on his own, you would be interested in? Or do you want to see what these young guys look like internally first before you offload any of them via trades and potentially make another big mistake with one of these young guys?
No, I would make this move right now. I mean, you said it was Arenado, Helsley, and who?
Arenado, Helsley, and Ivan Herrera.
Yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like, yes, you're giving up Ivan Herrera, and that could come back to bite you, especially for how powerful he could be offensively. But in my eyes, that's the price you got to pay, one, to get rid of Nolan Arenado. But two, I'm also getting something that could be beneficial for my team in return. I have no plans to win this season if I'm the Cardinals. The plans this year is to put all of my young players in a position to succeed. And how do you do that? Well, you got to start with moving Nolan Arenado. And unfortunately, you've put yourself in the pickle that you can't move Nolan Arenado by himself. So you add sweeteners to the pot. Ryan Helsley, I know you could probably get more at the trade deadline, but for right now, I get rid of Arenado and I bring something that helps me in return.
Man, I have no interest in this. None. And it's because of Ivan Herrera's inclusion. If you're thinking about including a young player, there are guys that I would listen on. This is just not the one that I would be willing to do. Ivan Herrera, I think, and we talked about this the other day, I think he might be the guy that has the highest ceiling of the players that you have currently because he's a catcher who could conceivably be at least average defensively behind the plate, can hit 300 and potentially hit you 25 bombs. Those guys just don't exist in Major League Baseball, man. That's like not Wilson Contreras, but William Contreras. What he provides behind the plate, I think that's what you're hoping Ivan Herrera at his ceiling, at his absolute ceiling, can be for the Cardinals. There's like 3 of those across Major League Baseball, and if you have the potential to have one of them behind the plate for you right now, I am not trading that.
I'm also concerned.
Especially not for this kind of a deal.
I'm also concerned for Ivan Herrera with this team that you don't get that playing time behind the plate because of the defensive side. And how many times have we seen a guy get overlooked by the Cardinals? And maybe it's different now with Chaim Bloom in charge, and maybe they try and focus a little bit more on this. But the main goal for my team is to find a way to move on from Nolan Arenado. And if I'm going to put an Ivan Herrera in that package, I'm expecting something back in the similar light of who Ivan Herrera is in return.
He's Alex. That's Grant on BK. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
Open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Chaos has emerged today, Alex, in the House.
What are you talking
This is not about politics, I
Son of a
promise. However,
no.
two people nearly got into a fight today during House Oversight Committee
hold on.
hearings.
I'm interested in this.
Yeah,
Like
I
an
thought
actual
you might be
fist
interested
fight?
in. Yes.
Man, this is the
So-
type of paid programming I like to watch.
What happened was one of them said something that led to another, and she used the term child in reference to her.
Oh, yeah, that's the
Yep,
trigger.
yep.
That, or do you watch the games? Two
She
triggers
then
that like
said,
to start
quote,
fights.
I am no child. Do not call me a child. I am no child. Don't even start. I'm a grown woman, 47 years old.
Is she referencing a Dr. Seuss book? I am not a child. Don't call me a child. No child I am, Sam.
She then continued, I am not a child. I'm a grown woman. If you want to take it outside. And then they said, Mr. Chairman, the committee is not in order. Order a point. Order a point. The chairman, this is not in order. And they all left the building for a little bit to take a recess, as you can imagine. Here's my question to you in relation to this. What is that trigger for you?
Oh.
Because everybody's got something, right? Where you hear it and you're like, that's the thing that will get me to this place where it is, do you want to take this outside? Do you have a trigger word like that for you, Alex? I'll be sure to use it in the future.
I don't think you want to take
Other
this
than
outside.
just-
I don't think you want to.
No,
you
definitely
don't
not.
want any of this. And I don't. It's kind of. I'll say this. I've never had it happen to me to where I've immediately looked at somebody and said, let's take this outside. Maybe that's just me. You want to take this outside? I will say in the past, something that has gotten me to my boiling point is when I've been called lazy.
Yeah.
When somebody refers to me as lazy, and I know that I am the opposite of lazy, that's when, again, I've never been the, let's go outside. That's where I'm going to start really pushing back.
Yeah, that's something that happened to me on this station. A coworker.
It's happened to me in this business.
Yes, a coworker said that he thought something that we were doing was not well thought out. It didn't require work. I had a serious conversation with him. It went on for about an hour, and by the end of it, we came to amends, and we both went our separate ways. And then since then, I've had a really good relationship with that person. But
Really,
yeah,
what he's saying, he said to him, you want to go outside?
Yeah.
The guy knocked him out. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Appreciate it.
That is definitely one of them for me. The other is just like disrespect to my wife or my son.
Yeah.
If those happen, you can, look at me. I am not somebody that is exactly going out there like ready to fight at a moment's notice. But that's the thing that really gets under my...
That's never happened to me, but you're right. If something happened, if somebody said something to my wife or my kids, that would be the moment that I just immediately go into like, yeah, let's handle this.
Somebody said being called bud when I am not a bud with somebody. Being called pal, but in the sarcastic sense where somebody is like, okay, pal, that one really gets me.
Yeah,
No?
I guess in the moment
Doesn't
it
do it
probably
for
would
ya?
piss me
Man.
off. But again, it's not going to get me to the point of let's take this outside. It would get to the point where
there
I'm going
are
to...
very few things, to be fair, that get me to that point.
It would definitely get me to the point where I start using a lot more obscene language towards you. Like, typically I'm a pretty calm guy, but that would take me to the next level. There'd be F-bombs involved there.
Grant, anything do it for
Grant
you?
is the calmest guy I've ever met.
I feel like T-Bone would have had something for this for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If someone gets me to that point, I don't really get mad at a person. I just get like apathetic with the person. Like I no longer care about you, and I'm not going to spend
They're dead
any
to you.
emotion or like effort towards you. Like, I'm not going to take something outside. Like
See, that's the thing. It's like I've never been, we're going to go outside.
I'm just going to no longer value your opinion at all.
I got to be honest, if I was in that courtroom and that was taking place, I'd be the dude in the back when they said court's adjourned. I'd be like, boo!
No, this was
keep this going.
This was in the House of Representatives.
Even better.
This wasn't in a court. This wasn't some like person on trial.
Oh, yeah.
These were people that represent our country.
Even better, I'd be in the back going, boo! Let's keep this thing rolling.
With Alex and Grant on BK. Coming up next, who is the guy that the Blues need more from in order for them to make a playoff run? Alex said he got asked this yesterday on a Calgary radio station, and he had one answer, and he's changed his tune and thinks that he might now have a different one. We'll give you ours for that. Hear from some of you as well. 314-399-9646. That's coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alex went on Calgary radio yesterday, and they effectively programmed a segment for us. They asked Alex, who is the guy that the Blues need more from the rest of the year if they are going to be a playoff team? And Alex, you said you went on there and you said one thing, and then you thought about it as you were saying what you were, and you almost flipped your answer on it because you thought, you know what, it's actually somebody else. So when you think about this question, who's the guy that the Blues need more from in order to make it to the postseason? 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line if you'd like to give your answers in. Who is the person that you have decided on, Alex?
So I originally, when they asked me that question, I originally said it's Jake Neighbors.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I said Jake Neighbors. I think he has 1 goal in 13 games. And I said they need more from him. They need somebody to be on that top line with Robert Thomas. But then as I'm talking about that, I continued to say, like, Robert Thomas is a 100-point player. They need to get a winger with him. They're looking for somebody. And then I'm thinking to myself, the answer is Pavel Buchnevich.
That's interesting. Okay.
And the reason why is, like, Pavel Buchnevich, if you look at it, he's 29 points in 42 games. But Pavel Buchnevich is not the guy that he was when the Blues originally traded for him. No.
He's on pace for 20 goals this year and only 55 points.
And he has not been good defensively. And that's why I originally kind of I settled on it's got to be Pavel Buchnevich. We can talk all day long about finding the other winger for Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, but I think that is a moot point. One, until they figure out what Jimmy Snuggerud is. Two, until they go out there and acquire somebody. Because I don't think they've got another top-line talented player. Or if they do, he's not there in terms of, like, ability to play there. Yeah, like a Dylan Holloway. Can't do it because you don't got a second-line winger. Man, it's Pavel Buchnevich. I split this up. So the first 10 games under Jim Montgomery with Buch, he had 4 goals, 9 points, a +8 with 27 shots on goal. That team had picked up a total of 12 points in 12 out of a possible 20 points. In the last 11 games, including last night, he's got 2 goals, 7 points. He is a +1 with 17 shots on goal, and the team is 6-4-1 in that stretch.
17 shots in how many games you said?
In 11 games played.
That's not good enough.
And the +1 is my thing. Like Robert Thomas, as Kerbs mentioned, Robert Thomas has to be your best defensive centerman. And I think there's been games that he hasn't been that. But I could also look at it and say they need more from Pavel Buchnevich. Pavel Buchnevich is having a good season, but I think they need to get to the playoffs. They need him to be what Pavel Buchnevich was in that 21-22 season where he was 30 goals, 76 points, but more importantly, he was a +29, one of the best defensive forwards.
I would push back against the notion that he's having a good season. I actually don't think he's having a good season relative to what he is at this point. He's making $8 million. If we're going to criticize Jordan Kyrou for being a guy that is making $8 million that's not living up to expectations, we damn well better have the exact same energy when we're talking about Pavel Buchnevich.
To be fair, he's only making $5 million. Next year, he's making $8 million.
Okay. Well, we did this with Kyrou when he was making, what, $3 million the year before? Because we were like, oh, but he's an $8 million player now. Buch is on pace this year to score 20 goals and have 53 points. That's the kind of production I expect out of somebody like Brandon Saad, not Pavel Buchnevich. And he doesn't have an excuse of not being on a line with somebody that can get him the puck. No, Robert Thomas is one of the best distributing centermen in the NHL. And he has shown us every reason to believe that he is capable of being that. And Pavel Buchnevich has shown us, as recently as last year, he can still be that guy. That's why they re-signed him and gave him that long-term extension. So he's got to be better than this. Yeah. Like, flat out, I totally agree with you, Alex. That was my first answer. I do have another one.
Okay.
And I'm curious, what is your answer on this, Grant? Did you have Buch as well as the guy that needs to step up?
I would have had Buch in my top 2.
Who would have been the other one?
Brandon Saad.
See, I thought about Brandon Saad, but I think Brandon Saad's exactly who he is. He should be on your third line. Like, I can't ask for more.
Yes, but at the same time, he's also consistently put up near 20 goals per year, and he's scored in 3 games this season. Mind you, he just has 7 goals in those 3 games.
He's still going to get the 20 for some odd reason.
He's scored in 3 games this season. Here's the other thing. There's been 17 times this season where Brandon Saad has been a minus. The Blues are 13-1 in those games.
Wow.
In the games where he's a plus.
And I bet you that's from playing the top line or the third line that has been on the ice for a goal against.
In the games that he's been a plus, they're 7-1-1. Yeah. And, I mean,
and when you're playing like a top line player, you're winning.
Right. And in the majority of those games where he's a plus, he's got a point in those games. So for Brandon Saad, it hasn't been what he's normally done. Usually he will put up a fair amount of points. He hasn't done that this season.
Yeah.
I've got a different one. And Alex is going to get mad at me, so I'm not going to look at him. I'm just going to direct this towards you.
I will. You wanted to ask me earlier about what says take this outside. If you say who I think you're about to say, we will take this outside.
Can I guess? Are you going to say Jordan Bennington?
Yeah. If we're going to talk about his win-loss record whenever he's not putting up great numbers in terms of his save percentage, we also have to talk about it this year. His win-loss record a couple of years ago, Alex, when you used to cite it, he had that year in 2019 where he was 30-13 in an unbelievable record, right? And even since then, while his numbers were down, 18-14 for a couple of consecutive seasons. 2 years ago, when the team wasn't very good around him, he still found a way to be basically 500. He was 27-27. Have you looked at his record this year?
Mm-hmm.
He's 12-16-3. They are under 500 when Jordan Bennington starts games for them this year. That's not good enough, man. And if you look at his save percentage, it's back to where it was 2 years ago, and his defense is a hell of a lot better than it was 2 years ago. I can't give him that out this year. They have a really good head coach that is playing a structured game right now. Last night, that goal, it didn't end up costing them because they found a way to win that game. You can't allow that goal. And I think Jordan Bennington, for the most part, was pretty damn good last night. But the goal was a bad one, man. He didn't track it. I can't explain why. It was a weird play. We talked about it before the show today. Broberg seemed to not want to commit all the way because he was fearful that he would potentially screen the goalie. And then by not getting in the way, it allowed for kind of a weak shot to be able to go on net. And then Benner didn't track it. He went low and the shot went high. It was just a weird play overall. Bennington's got to be better if this team's going to make the playoffs. He's got to be your best penalty killer. We've been talking for weeks now about how bad this penalty kill has been. Well, coaches tell you the best penalty killer has to be your goalie, and Jordan Bennington has not been good enough. The biggest difference between when the PK was better earlier this season, although not good, and where it is today, it's not the shots that have been taken, it's not high danger chances. No, the biggest difference is their save percentage in those situations, and that goes back to Jordan Bennington. So I think he's been mostly okay this year, and there have been stretches where he's been very good. They need him to be consistently very good, and he's got to elevate his game down the stretch. I think he can, but he's a guy that I would point to and say, that's the guy that's got to be better for them to make the playoffs.
Surprisingly, we don't have to take this outside, buddy, because I agree with you. I was kind of, when we were talking about it on the Calgary radio, I was taking the goalie out of it because I think in every conversation, the goalie needs to be better. But
for the Blues, it's different because Binnington is the face of the franchise.
Well, and if you look at what he did last year, it was 5th best in terms of goals saved above expected. If that's the Jordan Binnington that they had right now, I think you'd be in one of those wild card spots.
Totally agree. They would be flipping spots with the Calgary Flames.
I even think you might be competing with Colorado because if he was playing that way, you would have had a longer stretch earlier on in the season. And there have been games, specifically I'm looking at that Columbus, Minnesota stretch where you gave up 6 goals that your goaltenders kind of let you down. He's 30th right now. He's a positive in terms of goals saved above expected, but he's in the same conversation as Jake Allen and Andrei Vasilevsky and Yusei Saros. It goes to tell you, some goalies are having some bad years.
No doubt.
But this is a team that's better in front of you defensively. This is a team that has a coach that emphasizes the defensive side of the game. You can't be letting goals that can be deflators past you. And so I think Jordan Bennington will get there. Typically, December, January is just down months for some reason for him. But if this team wants to go anywhere that they believe they can, it is going to fall on the goaltender's shoulders, and that's where this kind of has to step in the right direction.
What have you made of him this year, Grant? From Jordan Bennington and the performances that we've seen?
If you're comparing it, let's just compare it to the last 2 seasons. He's been better than he was 2 seasons ago.
Definitely.
He's been worse than he was last year.
Right in the middle.
He's right in the middle of those 2 seasons.
And you would agree that the structure around him is better than it was either of those 2 seasons,
100%.
Right?
100%. But I'm not worried about Binnington. Would I say he would like to be better looking at what he's done so far this season? I'd say he would tell you that he'd probably want to be better than what they've done this season. They've had some games where he played well enough that they should have won, but they've also had games where they score 4 goals and weren't able to win because 6 went in on the other side. So I don't see a problem with Binnington going forward. I think he's going to sort everything out. Everything's going to return back to normal. And I think for the remainder of the season, I have no worries about the goaltending for the Blues. But if we're just isolating the first half of this season, I don't think he's been at his best.
It's weird, too, because I agree with Grant. He has been in the middle if you compare the 2 seasons. But I can reference 5 or 6 games to where Jordan Bennington has kept you in the game.
Totally.
But I can also reference 5 or 6 games that he has let you down with a save. So
I think he has been a personification of the Blues' performance this year. The Blues are inconsistent. And part of that is because Jordan Bennington has been inconsistent. When Bennington is on top of his game, he looks really good. And the Blues look really good. When he hasn't been at the top of his game, and most of that has happened basically since the start of December, the Blues don't look as good. And guess what? That coincides with when the Blues have had this slippage under Jim Montgomery. I don't think they're a bad team. I don't think Jordan Bennington's a bad goalie. In fact, I think Jordan Bennington's a really good one, which is why I would say him elevating his game is realistic for them. I believe that it can happen for them. It's why I think they can still make a push for the postseason. But it's got to happen, man. Mm-hmm. If you ask the question of which player has to raise their game the rest of the way to give the Blues their best chance to be able to make it to the postseason, My answer is Jordan Binnington, and for me, I'm not sure there's a close second. Pavel Buchnevich would be my second player on that list, but it would be a pretty big gap for me between where Binnington is and where Pavel Buchnevich is.
If I'm the Blues, I play Binnington tomorrow. And I know it kind of goes against what has happened this season because Joel Hofer's been better at home versus Jordan Binnington's been on the road. And right now you need that win on Saturday against Utah. I'd probably play Binnington on Saturday against Utah as well. Like, I know that's a lot of hockey, but last night, with the exception of that one goal that got past him, I mean, he made the brilliant saves when you needed to, especially when Calgary had a little bit of momentum in the third period. He shut things down. You need that tomorrow against Calgary, and you need it on Saturday. This is playoff hockey, and playoff hockey is Jordan Binnington, and that's why I'm going to give the dog his bone right now and say, Binnington, we need 2 points tonight. Go out there and get it for us.
That's exactly what I was about to mention. You're playing playoff style hockey right now, and we mentioned this coming off of the Winter Classic. All of us believed that he was going to have a huge performance in that. Why? Yeah. Because it's a big game. He gets up for those, and when the season's on the line, when you've got all the chips down, he's the guy I want in net. He's the reason why, if the Blues make it to the playoffs, there will be people nationally and certainly locally that look at the Blues and say, not sure you want to play that team. They've got the goalie. They've got the goalie that scares you if they're able to get in. But they've got to get in, and that's why it becomes incumbent upon him to be the guy that ends up getting you in. I'm with you, Alex. I would go back to Binnington against Calgary, and then I would see how it works in that game to find out if you go back to him against Utah or not. But I would absolutely be going back to Benner on Thursday night. I think it's the right move. He's Alex Ferrario. That's Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to give you a chance to win a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. That is coming up on July 7th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. We've got your chance all week long here on BK and Ferrario to win lawn tickets to see Chris Stapleton, so stay tuned for that. We'll get to that in just a little while. But next time, for more likely to happen, you give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one's more likely here on BK and Ferrario. 643-999-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start out with this, Alex. Coaching hires in the NFL. I would assume we'll probably get some news on this within the next week or two. More likely to happen. The Dallas Cowboys hire Deion Sanders, or the Chicago Bears hire Ben Johnson. Which one is more likely?
I'm going to say it's more likely that the Chicago Bears hire Ben Johnson. I don't see the Deion Sanders Dallas Cowboys thing happening. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting. I think it makes Dallas look good that they're considering some quirky coaches for their team. That's not going to go down. That's 2 alpha males going at it with each other. I don't see that happening. I don't see the Ben Johnson thing happening either, because Chicago seems really set on going after like a Mike McCarthy. But if you were to tell me one of these two, I would go the Ben Johnson with Chicago.
I think that's the route I would go as well. But man, I don't know. There's some buzz coming out today that Ben Johnson is having some momentum towards the Raiders, and I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
If you're Dan,
not from the Raiders' perspective, it makes all the sense in the world for the Raiders. That's a really good hire for them if they can make it. And hey, kudos to Tom Brady. Pulled a rabbit out of his hat, I suppose.
And something else. Yeah.
And found a way to hire what is, I believe, the most appealing candidate on the market this offseason. But for him, you're going to the most difficult division in the NFL with no quarterback in place. It's baffling.
If I'm Dan Campbell, how am I not telling Ben Johnson not to take that job?
Why did you sit out of the market last year?
Yeah.
Especially like Washington, for example. Look at that quarterback class and look at the options that were potentially there for you with Washington and new ownership that was in place already. And now look at the job you're about to take with Las Vegas. It doesn't compute for me. I don't get it.
I don't either. I think that's a terrible career decision by Ben Johnson. Frankly, if you're giving me the 2 options, I'd rather stay in Detroit for another year and wait for a better job opening next season than go to the Vegas Raiders.
All right, what do you got for us, Alex?
More likely to happen, guys. The Blues make a trade this offseason that includes a goaltender or a former first-round draft pick.
Former first-round draft pick. I know people get mad at me. I'm going to keep saying it until
the cows come home.
I think there's a decent chance this offseason they trade Zach Bolduc, because I think he's going to be the guy that has real value on the market for other teams, because he's proven already. I believe he can be a 20-goal scorer next year in the NHL. If he gets the right opportunity with a team that's not trying to contend, he could be a top 6 winger and put together 20 goals by playing 16, 17 minutes a night on that second line and then being a part of a power play unit as well. I just don't think that's happening here next year, and I don't know when it's going to happen here, to be honest with you. I don't know. They've got other plans, it seems like, for that spot in the lineup, so I think he's the guy that ends up getting moved if they make a significant move this offseason.
Tell me what you said one more time, because I've been troubleshooting over here.
Why, man? What's going on?
Oh, nothing. It's all fine.
More likely that a goaltender gets traded this offseason for the Blues or a former first-round draft pick?
I'm not going to go goalie, so I guess I'll go former first-round draft pick. I don't see them messing with Bennington Hofer right now.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't see them trading Bennington. Hofer's his record is good, but his numbers aren't great. So I don't know if he would command a ton of, value on the trade deadline.
Yeah, I'm going with the former first round pick is all. I'm same line of thinking as the Zach Bolduc. I just didn't know, because teams always want goaltending, and especially if you're trying to make some type of big move. I've brought up the Sam Reinhart before. That was the key piece to getting the Sam Reinhart deal done for Buffalo, was acquiring that goaltender. Yeah. Does a team come calling about one of it? And it's not just Hofer and Bennington. It could be this Colton Ellis kid that's in the American Hockey League, or Zarenko. They've got minor league players. Does that get attached to a draft pick that moves you up a little?
This one's going to tear at your heartstrings a little bit, BK.
Okay.
More likely to happen, Blues make the playoffs or Chiefs win the Super Bowl this season?
Chiefs win the Super Bowl.
I think I'm going to say Chiefs win the Super Bowl. I think the Blues get into the conversation. It's going to come down to a couple of those last games of the regular season. I legitimately see a path for the Chiefs to a Super Bowl.
Chiefs win 2 games, they're in.
Yeah.
And we're all in agreement. They're going to beat the Texans this weekend, right?
Well, they got to win 3 games to complete.
Yeah, he said win the Super Bowl.
Win the Super Bowl.
Win the Super Bowl.
Well, the 2 games get you there, and come on.
The toughest game for the Chiefs is going to be the AFC Championship game. Yeah. I think if they win the AFC Championship, I don't see how they lose the Super Bowl.
Totally agree.
It's interesting just basically betting against the field versus Blues. You're talking about 3 teams.
Yeah, and the Blues' path, to be fair, like the teams they're competing against, it's an easier path to get to that playoff spot than it is for the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, because the Chiefs will have to beat one of the Bills or the Ravens, which is really difficult in any one-game setting. And then they'll probably have to beat, let's be honest, probably the Lions or the Eagles, which is also not going to be an easy task. The Blues, the teams that are ahead of them, have you guys looked at this, by the way? They have a worse goal differential than the Blues do right now.
Yeah.
So it's not like these are world beaters that are in front of the Blues.
To me,
but I would still go Chiefs.
This race for that wild card spot, and maybe this is on me, I'm taking Vancouver out of it. Until Vancouver makes a roster decision, they are going to have Days of Our Lives Vancouver Canucks edition for the rest of the season, and it will plague them. I think Calgary, although they've been good, I think the Blues can obviously swat them back a little bit after Thursday if they can win. I think this is going to come down to the Blues in Utah for that final wild card spot, and I'd give the Blues the advantage.
So by the end of Thursday night, Vancouver will have played. They'll have played LA. Say they lose that game.
They will.
Let's say the Blues win that game. The Blues will be effectively at that point tied with the Vancouver Canucks and 1 point back of Calgary.
And if
suddenly you're right back into this thing.
And depending on
That's why these were huge games.
And depending on what that game looks like, your goal differential could be closer to the green than any of those other teams.
It already is. You're -7 right now. Those teams are -11. You have, among all of the wild card contenders not named Colorado, you have the best goal differential right now. Second best are those 2 teams at -11.
Yep, and they got to go on a run. That's all
Even
they need.
In the East, the 2 teams that are currently in the wild card spot out there both have a negative goal differential. Yep. It's crazy what's happening right now in the NHL. Yep. All right, let's get to the text line. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. More likely to happen from the 636. Mizzou basketball makes it to the Sweet 16 this year, Alex, or the football team makes it to the college football playoff.
I'm going to say the football team makes it to the college football playoffs. They've got the quarterback. They've got some elite talent now as they got the kid from Georgia. Their defense is going to be playoff caliber defense next year. It just comes down to what Prebula looks like. So I'm going to say they get to the college football playoffs.
It's crazy if I say the basketball team?
I thought about it, man. I was kind of wavering.
And the reason why is because of the name that you said. I don't know what Prebula is going to be. I think he might be really good, but I was texting with a buddy yesterday. He said, I could make an argument that Mizzou has one of the 3 worst quarterback situations in the SEC going into next year. Ooh. And the reason why is not because you think it's going to actually be bad, but there are other teams that just have known commodities at the position right now, and Mizzou very much does not. For the first time in a few years, they have no clue what it's going to look like at the most important position on the field. So I'm with you. I think the defense will be very good, but they're in a difficult conference, and they don't know what the quarterback situation is. Mizzou has shown a capability on the basketball court this year to beat the top teams that they're going up against. So I think they'll probably be like a 7 seed most likely in the tournament, beat that 10 seed that you'll go up against. That can very much be done. And then it's a 1-game scenario where you could potentially get to the Sweet 16. So I'll go Mizzou basketball, as crazy as it might seem.
I think I might actually lean basketball too, and I'm not huge into basketball, but just knowing that, that tournament can be a crapshoot anyway, and they just beat one of the best teams in the nation last night, I could see them getting to the Sweet 16. Meanwhile, for football, you're talking about a question mark right now at your biggest position. So I think I would lean towards basketball here as well, BK.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Last one here, guys. More likely to happen. MLB puts in a salary cap, or Major League Baseball teams, one of them, will at least have a $500 million payroll. How far are we from that right now? Who has the highest payroll in Major League Baseball as of today?
I don't know.
It is the Dodgers at $300 million.
Well, and I don't know if the Dodgers can get there because they just keep deferring money more and more.
So by the CBT, they're at $360. I think it is more likely to happen that we get a $500 million payroll. I think the next big fight that we will get in the next CBA discussion, and it's going to be a bad one, it's going to be over a salary cap, and players are, I think it could actually end up being a good thing for the players, but
yeah,
they will completely reject any notion of a salary cap in the sport.
I'm saying this with my heart more than my head. It's more likely that the salary cap happens. I think with all of the references of these other teams and for how outlandish this is going to get with 3 teams spending a ton of money and then everyone else just kind of standing in the middle, I think you're going to see a salary cap at some point.
I'd love to see a salary cap as well, but I don't think it's going to happen in Major League Baseball. I'd deal with a $500 million cap for a team.
All right, coming up next, we'll tell you some news that happened earlier today in college football. And Alex, I've got a number on what this player could have made had he stayed in college. I'll tell you what that is next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time for you to unlock your inner champion, and for everybody that looks a little bit differently. For some people, that might be low testosterone that you need some help with. For others, it's getting some help with that unwanted weight that you might have put on over the holiday season. They can help you out with that over at Victory Men's Health. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and you can check them out today at victorymenshealth.com. When you go over there, click in the upper right-hand corner. It says Book Now. You click that tab, and it's an incredibly easy process. Put in your name, phone number, email, tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and tell them how you'd like to unlock your inner champion. Again, they can help you out with erectile dysfunction, low testosterone, weight loss. Maybe you want to hear a little bit more about their red light therapy programs. It's all available for you today at Victory Men's Health. They can unlock your inner champion the way that they have for me at Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com.
Grit Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues win a massive game last night over the Calgary Flames. 2-1 the final score. As the Blues keep pace in the Western Conference, they inch 2 points closer to Calgary, who owns that final wild card spot right now in the Western Conference. They have 49 points. Blues have 46, just 3 points back of the playoffs right now for St. Louis. They'll look to get closer tomorrow night as they have Calgary again here in St. Louis. Pregame will start at 6 and puck drop at 7 here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. And then last night as well, a huge upset in college basketball. Mizzou takes down the number 5 team in the country, Florida, 83-82. The Tigers now 14-3 on the season, and they improved to 3-1 in the SEC. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and Grant, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Hey, join the Fast Lane and the Riz Show for Champ Bash at Hot Shots, in Fenton next Sunday, January the 26th. You can hang out with members of both shows and watch the AFC and NFC championship games. And more importantly, you will see the Riz Show perform their punishment live on site. Yes, I said it. The Riz Show will be performing their punishment because the Fast Lane won, Alex. We had the Rams on Monday night. That's exactly what we needed. They ended up taking care of business. So a nice win, good performance this year by the Fast Lane. Enjoy bucket specials, delicious food, tons of TVs. Watch the games, enjoy, hang out. Sunday, January 26th at Hot Shots in Fenton. Get all the details right now at 101ESPN.com. All right, so there was some news earlier today, Alex. Quinn Ewers, the quarterback for Texas. We knew he basically had 2 options. One, get up out of here. You don't have to go home, but you got to get up out of here because Texas is going with Arch Manning next year as the quarterback.
Makes sense.
So Ewers either had to transfer or go to the NFL draft. There is now a report that has come out by Front Office Sports, Ewers would have been offered $6 million from another team had he stayed in college. $6 million.
Yeah, that backs what I thought.
He chose not to do so. He has declared for the NFL draft, and he will be selected by a team in April. There are disagreements on where he's going to go. Most people believe sometime day 2 or day 3, so second to like a 4th round pick is kind of where people view him right now. Are you surprised he chose to enter the NFL draft, Alex? Because he's giving up a lot of money if that's where he ends up going. Guys that go that late in the draft do not make that kind of money.
They make less than $1 million, don't they?
I'll have to look up exactly where it was. Like in the event that he does get pushed up because it's a bad quarterback class, let's say he ends up somewhere like the middle of the 2nd round. I'll look up what that would have been.
I think this is a bad decision. I told you in the office when the news broke that this is like terrible counseling by his agents. Like, I would not be going into the NFL draft after you had a good season, but the way that college football playoff ended is not looking good for a Quinn Ewers. And you're right, this is a softer quarterback class. Maybe he gets selected a little bit higher than originally anticipated. Even so, you will be a backup quarterback for the first 3 to 4 years of your career in the NFL, and I don't think you're going to be making a lot. You could have made $6 million to be the star of a college football team next year, potentially had an even better season, and gone in the 1st round of the draft next season.
All right, I've got your number here for you. A.D. Mitchell last season, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts, previously with Texas. That's why I use him as the example. He went 52nd overall, which is higher than I think that Ewers will likely go in this year's draft, but just for conversation's sake. A.D. Mitchell is the 52nd overall selection. In base salary this year, made $795,000. Over the entirety of his contract, which is a 4-year deal, $7.3 million. So he was potentially going to make $6 million next year with a college, and instead he will be opting into a deal that over 4 years will pay him somewhere in that range of $7 million. And that's if things go really well for him during this draft process and he gets pushed up. It will likely be a decent amount less than that. So
you could have gone to a team and been the star of that college team to make it to another college football playoffs, potentially have a Jaden Daniels-esque year. And I'm not saying you go 2nd overall, but you get drafted in the 1st round.
And potentially work on your game. Yeah. Maybe most importantly.
And make $6 million.
I'm very surprised by this decision. He can do whatever he thinks is best. He just didn't want to be in college anymore. Fair. Totally get it, man. But I'm pretty surprised by this. You could have gone into next season as one of the Heisman candidacy favorites as well. There's not a ton of big-time quarterbacks that are expected to come back to college next year anyway. I would have, if I was the one that was advising him, I would have said, go ahead and come back. That's the right thing for you to do as a player. But he chose not to.
Especially after Carson Beck just had this happen to him. Like, you just went from Georgia to Miami and got $4 million. And if I'm Quinn Ewers, I'm like, I am better than Carson Beck. And I just proved it with Texas. I could get more than that. And I get 1 more year to be the #1 guy. And guess what? Everybody's going to be talking about me this year because Texas chose Arch Manning over me. That's motivation. And you go out there and you perform well. Let's say he goes to Oregon. Just throwing that out there because Dylan Gabriel's going in the draft.
Or Georgia or Ohio State. Like, the teams that are still left, a lot of them still need a quarterback.
I could have went in there and looked at as middle of the 1st round, which that is life-changing money on top of already making $6 million in college.
And even if we set aside the money side of things, right, which is hard to do. It's hard to do. It's better for you in your game. He's not ready for the NFL right now. He's not an NFL quarterback as of today. We've said it all year long. There are just too many mistakes that he makes, and it's going to be harder, not easier at the NFL level. You will make more mistakes, not less mistakes. Defenses are more complicated, not less complicated. And so when you get into all of this different stuff, it doesn't pass the sniff test for me. But hey, it's his decision ultimately. And if he didn't want to go to college, he didn't want to go to college. So
yeah, maybe he was just done with education. You know, he's like, I don't want to take any more exams.
I get it. I wouldn't either. There are a lot of kids that just say, you know what, I don't want to deal with the school aspect anymore. And so that's totally fair. Again, it's his decision to make. From my perspective, my seat, which is on the outside looking in, certainly, I think this would have made more sense for him in his career. All right, one thing that I did want to note, there was a big story earlier today that posted over on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website, Alex, and it's in relation to Mizzou athletics. The headline is, Mizzou's athletic department reports $15 million deficit, gets internal university loan in order to pay it off. So this is for, it gets a little complicated with this fiscal year stuff.
Oh, good.
But basically, July 1st of 2023 up until June 30th of last year, 2024, right? So that calendar year, the first big Mizzou season, not this past one that we just saw, but a year ago when Mizzou ended up going to the Cotton Bowl, like that is what is included for this. The offer in college basketball, that the conference slate for Mizzou basketball, that is also what is included in this fiscal year conversation that they're talking about. Well, Mizzou ended up having a pretty significant deficit in the athletic department. And what they ended up doing was getting what they are calling direct institutional support, end quote, from the university to the tune of $25 million. Oof. So it was a $25 million, effectively a loan from the university to the athletic department in order to support their budget. Now, it's worth noting, I did not know this previously, to be totally upfront and honest. They had apparently done $22 million in a similar kind of a loan the year prior. So this was the first year. The reason why this made news is because the university, the athletic department, sent out a press release publicizing this. I find this to be really interesting, Alex, and I think it's the way that things are just going to have to go from here on out, and it's kind of preparing them for the revenue sharing stuff as well. I think a lot of universities see their athletic department as a marketing arm, an advertising arm of the university. Missouri's highest admission, their biggest freshman class ever, guess when it came? 2008, the year after their 2007 unbelievable football season. Why? It's advertising, baby. When you're out there, especially when you're in the SEC and you're putting together a bunch of wins and millions of people are watching on television, guess what kids are saying? I'd like to go be at those games. Mm-hmm. I'd like to be a part of that. Looks like a lot of fun, right? So I think you're going to see more and more of this from other schools across the country, and they're not alone in this. Other schools are already doing this, but especially if you're a team like Mizzou, a program like Mizzou that wants to keep up with Alabama and Texas and Notre Dame with these huge budgets in their athletic department, you're going to have to find ways to be able to bring in extra sources of revenue, and this is one of those ways that you can get it done.
And so that's why they publicize it, is it's just another avenue of, because that's the part that I'm a little surprised by.
I think you publicize it because it's good faith to your fans. So they're asking their boosters to continue to give more.
And this is why. It's like the example of like, this is why we
are also supporting our football program.
Okay.
Please don't forget that. Our university is spending $25 million to help our football program. We are investing, and we are also asking for your help to continue investing as well. It's hard for them to say, hey, season ticket holders, your price is almost doubled this year, and we're not contributing ourselves. You need to pay for all of our stuff. If they're not also going out there saying, look, this is what we are contributing.
It makes all of the fans feel like they have a piece of the action for the Missouri Tigers.
Well, that's already the case. They don't want fans to feel like fans are alone paying
doing
for
it
all
all.
of this.
Okay, I got you.
They want fans to be like, hey, yes, we are helping, but also so is the university. And the athletic department's doing everything they can. So it's going to be a fascinating place to see what happens in this area 10 years from now. It's one thing if Mizzou's doing this a couple of times. What happens 10 years from now when they've been, for a 10-year stretch, the university is loaning the athletic department this kind of money?
Yeah.
That's when it gets a little more interesting in my opinion. All right, with Alex and Grant, I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. That's coming up in July. We'll give you a chance every day this week on BK and Ferrario to win a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. We'll do that and hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
Run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That app is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. It is super easy to use, and of course, it is free for you to download today, so be sure to check that out. You can always watch us on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. That is where the Graveyard Chat is available for you. You can watch it during the show, or you can watch it after. It'll be marked up for you. You can check out your favorite segments that you want to see. If you're just a Blues fan, you want to see all the Blues segments, it's available for you at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. And right now is your shot to score a pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. That's coming up on July 11th at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. For more information on that, check out 101ESPN.com, or you can text in all week here on BK and Ferrario and on the Fast Lane all week long. We're giving you chances to win these pairs of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you were texter number 101 with the correct answer to the following question, you're getting that pair. So earlier today, we talked about a fight that almost took place out at the Capitol. Alex, you and I both said there is a word that would be our trigger word that would get us to the place where we would say, you need to take this outside.
Let's go.
What were those words? If you can get one of either Alex's word or my word in your texture number 101 at 314-399-9646, you are getting that pair of tickets to see Chris Stapleton. All right, to finish out the show today, we get to the BK and Ferrario Rewind. Alex, big win for the Blues last night. They've got to find a way to play that way consistently. But what did you see that was able to get them that win that they desperately needed against Calgary?
They played like a playoff game. I mean, they didn't have the sexiest game offensively. Frankly, it was a little choppy. But what I saw was a commitment to the defensive side of the ice, which goes to show you the 3 high-danger scoring chances that they gave up to Calgary and the 18 blocked shots. They were committed to winning that hockey game. When you're great defensively, the offense will come. We've seen that for the Blues since Jim Montgomery has taken over, being one of the best even-strength teams in the National Hockey League. I'm expecting tomorrow's game to be a lot more difficult because Calgary's got rest. They just saw the Blues, but I'm expecting the Blues to have that same commitment with a little bit more offensive upside.
It looked like a Jim Montgomery coach team. That looks like what he wants. Low high-danger chances against. You take advantage of the opportunities that you have. A defenseman getting in on the scoring. Like, everything about that game, that's what Jim Montgomery wants. The urgency was there as well. Radek Faksa played a really good game. That fourth line basically became your third line by 4 minutes into the third period, and the third line no longer saw the ice after that point in time. So it was very much a prototypical Jim Montgomery game, and now you got to go do it again.
Yep.
You can't just do it once. That's a one-off. We saw this with the Cardinals. There would be times the last year where it's like, oh, okay, that's the team. Like, that's the formula for them to be able to get into the postseason, and then they fall apart.
Yep.
And they go through a stretch where they stop playing that way. So Blues got to get it done again tomorrow night against Calgary. Game at home that we'll continue to preview right here on 101 ESPN tomorrow. Last thing that I wanted to get to today, Alex, Mizzou basketball last night. Huge victory on the road, top 5 opponent, Florida. This is the type of game that I did not think this team was capable of winning. Do it at home, sure. You beat KU earlier this season in a very similar type of game. Going on the road at Florida, I didn't know this team had that in them. For them to be able to go out there and start off the way that they did, get out to that huge lead, and then hold on for dear life there at the end, especially during the foul trouble. Kudos to Dennis Gates. Kudos to Teo Barrett, who went out there and had an awesome game for them last night down the stretch. That's the kind of win that gets you into March.
Yeah.
That is the kind of win that punches your ticket. You go 500 the rest of the way, probably like a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, creates excitement. I mean, frankly, what I've seen them do against Kansas and even that game in the bragging rights against Illinois, like they were with them for a good chunk of it. And then with this Florida one, I know the SEC is tough, but I think Mizzou is one of those tough teams in the SEC, and they proved it with that victory over Florida. The shooting was impressive. To me, they can play that bully style of basketball, which is it's a really good feeling to see that from Mizzou.
He's Alex Ferrario. That is Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Shout out to Grant for helping us out today. T-Bone going to be back in the studio with us tomorrow. We'll certainly talk about his Illini. He went to the game
No, we don't need to do
last night, so we'll talk to him about that a little bit. Want to get his thoughts as well. He seems to think, given what Mizzou has in the portal this offseason, he thinks it's college football playoff or bust again for them next year. I'm not sure I agree with that, but we'll get his thoughts on that tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk Blues versus Flames as well. That's all coming tomorrow on BK and Ferrario. The Fast Lane is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.